All right, welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. I'm so humbled to be your host, Mike Cunningham, National Business Development Manager for Gill Athletics. And buckle up. That's all I'm going to say on this one. This is going to be a lot of fun. First of all, I've known this guy for a lot of long time. We have a lot of familiarities, and kind of our career a little bit. And honestly, he's a little bit like my brother from another mother. I really do love this guy. So help me welcome the new head coach. Maybe it's director. I don't know the difference. Maybe we'll ask him. A team that I grew up a huge fan of, by the way. So it's another, a lot of emotions here. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful head coach of Florida State University, Mr. Matt Kane. Matt, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me, man.
What are you? Are you the head coach or the director? And what is the difference?
Director of track and
Okay.
field. So we have a head women's cross country coach. So that it's just a stair step situation.
All right.
A lot of people have a different title when they have other titles for other people. There's a lot of associate head coaches at a lot of different places.
Yeah.
Previous title, etc. So
I just saw someone, and again, and this doesn't, I'm not gonna say the name, but if you figure out the name, it's not about the person. They were just promoted from assistant head coach to associate head coach, and I was like, what's the difference? I think living in corporate world now, I think the difference is this is how we get you a pay raise, which I'm all for. I'm all good on that. But it was just like, well, I don't really know what the difference. They both had head coach, assistant associate. I don't know. Anyway. How are you, my friend? We're recording this. We're recording this when there's a little bit of a weather going on, but everything seems to be okay in Tallahassee.
Yeah, we're all good now. So everything cleared. Every electricity appears to be back 100%. So we're all good. We dodged a bullet.
Yeah,
significantly.
Yeah,
there was like the last 30 minutes or whatever. There was a shift that probably saved a lot of heartache.
Oh man, yeah. Well, there is a lot of heartache going on, kind of specifically up in that North Carolina area. When I see stuff like that, I typically, and I did in this case, email some head coaches like, "Hey, I'm just praying for you," things like that. But I'm also like, I'm like the last person you really want to hear from. I'm a little bit like, am I just clogging up your inbox because you have a lot more important things to do? So I kind of feel bad sometimes about that. But I won't get mad if they don't answer my email within 24 hours or anything like that. So. Well, Matt, let's dive into this, man. You and I have known each other for a long time, and I'm just, I've been on the sideline to watch your career, and it's been fascinating. I'm super, super excited and happy for you. And, for a program that, I'm from Florida originally and lived in Tallahassee for a while as a young kid. And so was a big Florida State, obviously specifically Florida State football fan, when PT Willis and those guys were there. So, to see a good friend of mine become the director, make sure I say Mr. Director, is really cool, man. It's just, I like to see good things happen to good people. So just really cool and excited for you. And, you and I have talked offline about that. So just want to publicly recognize that it's a cool thing, man. I'm very happy for you.
Yeah, it's an honor, to be honest with you. There's been some good coaches that have come through here, some big shoes to fill, but it's also a place where there hasn't been a tremendous amount of turnover in the last 40 years either.
Yeah.
So, and all those guys are still here. Terry Long's still in town, Dick Roberts still in town, obviously Bob still in town. So, got a lot of watchful eyes, but it's a good thing. Like, they're great people, great coaches, and provide some good perspective.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about the Longs being there too. Yeah, that's right. Wow,
yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, let's hop into your story, man. I'm a Marvel guy. I really like those Marvel movies, and my favorite ones are the first ones, the origin stories that show how Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man and all that. Let's talk about your origin story. Where does track and field start for you?
Oh man, track and field started when I was little, like little, like fastest kid in the school, little stuff. You know what I mean? And then you go to like. It was a different time. It was the 80s. So, you would have what 2 track meets a year back then. You run your like little track meet, and then you go to see who the fastest kid in town was, and then you go your one track meet there, and then that was the end of your track career. And then into the summer stuff. But I did a lot of different sports: football, baseball, basketball, a little bit, track and field, obviously, and then just kind of navigated myself through that. And some of the track stuff just kind of came natural to me. So and coaching the same. Like I ended up going to Central Oklahoma. It was a D2. They used to have track and field. They brought back the women's program, but they canceled the men's program maybe a year or two after I left. Anyway, but it was just like a place where I could go kind of develop, get better. I wasn't that good. I was like Oklahoma good, but not good. So, UCO was a really good spot for me. Coach Parent kind of let me come into the program and help me develop. And honestly, I had a GA there my junior and senior year that really was really good for me. You know, like I went from crappy to less crappy during that time. So
it was good. Back up real quick. Go back to high school.
Yep.
You're playing a bunch of different sports. You're a guy,
Yep.
you know, I love your passion. Like you're a passionate kind of guy. What, as it's with high school and you're deciding what to do, you know, on the next level, and you're playing different sports and you're getting experience in a lot of different things. What was it about track? Why track instead of football? Or, you know, you said basketball a little bit, but you know, why track?
Yeah.
What was it that drew you there?
Well, I mean, it's kind of, I think where people gravitate to things naturally because you're good at it, if that makes any sense. Like, you know, you're on a football team and you're one of 11 or whatever, and you get the ball and you do good things. Unless you're great, you're going to go Division 1. You know, like I was just good at football. I enjoyed football. I probably have a football mentality quite a bit. I had some great football coaches growing up. You know, like that was probably an area a lot of young guys want to go. Played baseball too. I love baseball. My son plays baseball. I'm a full-time baseball dad. But track was just one of those things where I could stand out. You know, like I would go to a meet, I would win every meet I went to. You know what I mean? I think when you just have success, you keep having success, and you keep having success, you sort of like you gravitate to what you're good at. And so it just sort of found me that way. That's kind of how I ended up doing that. It was a weird deal. It was obviously a different time where I could play. I actually played a little soccer as well, baseball, soccer, and track in the same season. Was a pretty intriguing. You certainly couldn't do that nowadays.
Yeah.
But we made it work. I mean, it's Stillwater. It was a small town, so you could do whatever.
When you're looking towards colleges and you end up going to Central Oklahoma, what were you thinking of majoring in? What was the life goals? Like, I'm going to become a business owner, English teacher. What were you thinking at that time as an 18-year-old?
So believe it or not, I was broadcast major. That's what I started out in. Yeah, I started working in TV and radio. Have a face for radio, so that works. But yeah, that's part of the reason I picked Central. Central had a really good broadcasting department. But it was also, again, it was a different time. I'm from Stillwater. Oklahoma State was potentially an option, but they were all distance back then. And so I was a 110 hurdler, 400 300 hurdler. They kind of let me know I needed to run the 800, which was not really something I was interested in. And then Oklahoma was not, I wasn't good enough to go to Oklahoma, to be honest with you, but also that my dad would have probably murdered me if I went to Oklahoma. So, because he's an Oklahoma State fan and we're from Stillwater. So Central was a good natural fit. It had kind of what I wanted to study and probably the right level for me athletically as well too. So that's how I ended up there.
Was coaching at all a thought in your head at that point?
Not at all. Not at all. It's kind of natural to me. Like when I was the best kid on the team in high school, that, you know, the kids would come and ask me for advice on, like, I was a hurdler. I fell into hurdling because my friend hurdled and I was over there just kind of, you know, how junior high practices are, you know, you just kind of hanging out mostly and the hurdler. So I was over there talking to him. And so I'm going to run and jump over a hurdle. And my coach saw me and was like, "Hey, do you want to do those tomorrow?" Sure. You know, like, and then I won the next day, like my first hurdle race ever. So not that it was any good. I'm sure it was probably 18 seconds or something terrible, but it was definitely a situation where like I did just sort of fell into it. So coaching wise, same thing happened when I got to college. There was a lot of people that would sort of gravitate towards the people that are more successful. And you just got to the point where you're just sort of helping other people. Cause I was good, but I wasn't great. So there was a lot of like coaching that made me better, if that made sense. So
kind of off topic, but you didn't 3-step your very first high hurdle race, did you?
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
No,
I was about to be really upset.
Thank God there was no video. There's probably some 3s and 4s and 5s in there. I just did whatever it took to get across the line.
Yeah. Okay.
Extremely competitive. So it didn't matter what I was doing. And my son just started running this past year. I've tried to get him to not, he's a baseball guy, but he ran like middle school track this past year. And he's that same kind of competitive. He has no idea what he's doing, but he put him on a 4x4. If he's in 6th, he'll get you to 1st and just keep you there. Then he has no idea what he's doing after that, but he's just competitive.
You know, I was terrible at the hurdles, and you know, most people who are terrible at the hurdles 5-step, right? It's just kind of a natural. You're not going to 3-step, you go 5. I think I took like 10. That's how bad I was. So I was like, dude, if you did 3 right off the bat, I'll just be upset, man. I can't handle that.
Yeah, I'm certain. I don't have real lucid memories, thank God,
Yeah.
of what 8th grade track looked like, but it was definitely not pretty, I'm sure.
Yeah. I kind of, you said, thank God there weren't video. I kind of wish there was video of me just so I could show, like, I think people think it's a little bit of like I'm putting on a little bit when I talk about how like
Mhm.
bad I was. I was like, I wish there was video to show you that I actually might be underselling how poor of an athlete I really was in the hurdle specifically.
Well, I definitely found a yearbook photo of me hurdling, and I was from maybe junior or senior year that I wish I didn't. It was not a clinic in technique. I can tell you that.
All right. You mentioned, so you go to Central Oklahoma. That's funny. And you mentioned a GA that kind of
Yeah.
made some changes with you. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So yeah, a guy named Chris Weiler. He's not in coaching anymore. He's smart, got out, makes a ton of money. He works he's senior VP for Arbonne or something like
Oh,
that. Anyway,
geez.
but yeah, he was actually a teammate my freshman year, and then he left, got a real job, and then came back and got a master's, got an MBA and whatever. Anyway, he was just a guy that was inspirational. He was younger, so he was good as an athlete. So we kind of looked up to him, but more than anything, he was just a guy that cared about us and it got us out there training and working together. And yeah, it was mostly about accountability and getting you to work hard and stuff like that. It was simple stuff, but he was good. And the good dude still is a good dude. So
It's interesting that the way you describe that as it being simple stuff. I learned early in coaching. You and I probably had conversations about this. Young people, they'll never say it out loud, but they want discipline. They want accountability.
yeah,
They want to go into programs where coach cares about, like you're talking about with Chris here, cared about you, not just a loosey goosey. Yeah, let's just go have fun and do whatever we want. I think young people look forward to that. They're never going to say, hey, I want you to be hard on me, or hey, I want you to do it. And it's not about being hard on you. Actually, I take that statement back, but it is about being disciplined, accountability, a lot of the things that we look for as adults, by the way, in our workforces. So
yeah,
it's interesting that coach came in there and kind of put that into you. And ducked out, by the way, went out of coaching. So it's not like he was like some lifelong coach that, had
yeah.
learned it.
No, I think he was just a guy that was. I mean, he's a successful person, and I
Mm,
think a lot of
mm,
successful people don't want to be surrounded by people that don't want to do the right things. They don't want to, they don't want to be around um, people that aren't going to hold themselves to a higher standard. And I think that's why he's successful, probably, in all the different things he's done in life. So that probably stuck with me subconsciously more than anything else. Just having somebody that kind of held a standard, forced you guys to kind of, without pulling teeth, made you step up to whatever that standard was.
mhm.
So yeah, good. And for us, it was just a change. Like, I loved our head coach. He was a very nice man, but he was, I mean, truthfully, had a quadruple bypass my freshman year. So he was not he wasn't present a lot. And,
Mhm.
no disrespect to him at all. Obviously, he had real life things happening. So Chris coming in was absolutely that breath of fresh air that we needed. You know what I mean? And like I said, I love Coach Parent. He was really, really good for us. But Chris, like I said, he just kind of brought us all together, and it was good.
Now, I've known you through your coaching career, and you always are a very knowledgeable about the technical side of the events that you coach. So much so that I don't think I've ever told you this personally. It was always intimidating to talk to you. I felt fairly good about my coaching level knowledge. Talking to you was always like, oh man, and the way I think I was intimidated because the way you express it, it's easy to understand too. You're not talking of, it's not like when Matt Kane talks to me, I'm like, well, I don't know what the dude's talking about. He must be smart. It was always like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Why didn't I think about that type of stuff? I lead that to this question of, as an athlete through college,
Mm.
what kind of athlete were you? And what I mean by that, were you the guy who was studying technique and, back then, this is the olden age, Matt, so not a lot of internet, but like, were you trying to find books or like what kind, like, or do you just like going through the motions like coach says, run, Matt, run?
Well, I'll be honest with you. When I got into coaching, well, when I was an athlete, the idea of video at practice was foreign. Like, we didn't do any of that. So I went directly from being an athlete to being a coach, right? And so I didn't necessarily like. Well, Chris was great. I modeled a lot of stuff that I did after Chris. It wasn't necessarily overly technical, but I remember getting in. I started in junior college, and I remember at the time, it was early days of internet, and just information outside of distance running was virtually unattainable.
Mhm.
Like, and I think the reason that people are running crazy times over the past 20 years and how it looks like an evolution, is because, and there's a lot more information, and then a lot more people have more information, and then it's exponential how that goes, so in the early 2000s, everybody good was in Florida, California, Texas, right? Because there's high population, so they had good athletes, saw each other, had to run fast in high school, and they got better, got better, got better. Well, now that same information has spread all over, 300 million people, and everybody's being coached better. Everybody's, and so it's not like we evolved athletically that way. And so I think it just puts a high level of competition on you. So what I did in 99, 2000 was like, I know nothing about the 100-meter dash, right? In my mind, like I was like, I don't know how to do what, like if I'm going to coach a kid in this, then I got to step my game up. And that's kind of how I've approached every event that I've ever coached, is like, I don't want to be the weak link. So I want to make sure I educate myself as much as I possibly can in the pole vault, mostly so someone doesn't die. In the hurdles, so that I could, make somebody be as good as they possibly can be. In the 100-meter dash, like there's got to be more information than what is available right now, right? And so I remember literally going to going to a Barnes and Noble and looking for a book on running that wasn't distance running, and striking out miserably, right? And so what I did was just kind of trying to educate myself any possible way that I could. I started looking for a variety of different things, and so I appreciate you feeling like I'm a technical person. Like I just strive for information, if that makes any sense. So, I found a bunch of Canadian stuff, Charlie Francis stuff, Brent McFarland stuff. Brent McFarland was probably a bigger influence on me. Just because he wrote a book. I was able to find a book. And when I found that book, probably about the time you and I met, I was able to kind of take that information and like apply it to what made sense to me. And so, you saying that I explain things in a way that made sense is I just try and take whatever the science is and apply it in a way that I can wrap my brain around. And it's, like in the JUCO world, which is the backbone of who I am, you're practicing in a basketball gym, you're for a long time, not like for a week, from, November to March. There's a better than good chance you're in a hallway or a basketball gym. And so I had to think, okay, this is what they were doing. Then start to break, look at the energy systems and look at all that different stuff. So it was just by necessity, to be honest with you, how I got where I was going. So like, I'm super competitive. This is what I got to work with. I want to get out of here. Just the same as those JUCO kids. Yeah. Like I wanted to I wanted to work myself up into a situation where I, maybe I could be a Division I coach one day. That was kind of my goal when I first got into coaching. Maybe I could do some of the stuff that I've done. So like I said, just necessity.
So how did you mentioned right out of college, you go into coaching. What changed? Where did it change in college where you go from, I'm going to be, Bob Barker, I'm going to go do some kind of media thing, to I'm going to coach? Where did that happen?
Well, I did switch my major halfway through, to be honest with you, because I made that decision. Okay. Like I'm kind of like probably about the time Chris got there, probably my junior year, I made a decision like, hey, maybe I'll be a coach. Maybe I'll be a high school coach or whatever. So then I think I did a semester. I was a history major because, every high school coach is a history major. And I actually enjoy history a whole lot, but I didn't enjoy that semester very much. So I also, and this strikes home more and more, I was like, I don't think I can coach high school kids, to be honest with you. So I was like, see if I can make this college thing work. So I switched my major and then started studying things that I thought would better prepare me, like biomechanics and so on and so forth. So I actually switched my major. I graduated with community health, and then my master's that I was working on started out in biomechanics. And then I took a high paying job at junior college. I think I made $1,000 a month, and the rest is history, I guess.
Well, first of all, $1,000 a month for JUCO back then, that was a lot. Holy cow. I did not know you were loaded back then when we first met. So what was that first job?
Butler Community College, in El Dorado, Kansas.
And what did
I was there for 4+ years or whatever.
What did you know about, you grew up in Oklahoma, so you're close to the Kansas system. Did you know a lot about the junior college? I knew nothing about the junior college system really before I joined in 2000 at Neosho, where we first met. But did you know like the vibrancy of junior college, and specifically the Jayhawk conference?
Yeah, not to the degree that obviously once I got into it, I really understood. It was one of those situations where I was like, so I was at a Division II in a conference, we were in a conference that was, we were the Lone Star Conference, which is all Texas schools, and we were the one Oklahoma school at the time. So even when we go to a conference meet, like we didn't know anybody, right? And so I knew some of the coaches at Oklahoma State. I knew Jill Lancaster at Oklahoma. That was about my coaching network. You know what I mean? So I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to need to go to junior college to get started, or I'm never going to meet anyone. So, you know, networking is how you move up. So I was conscious enough to know that I was going to need to do that like my senior year. I started out as a GA at Central. Just I took Chris's job essentially, and then job at Butler that next fall. So I was there a year and change before I went to Butler. But I kind of knew that this is a place where you could go because Barton used to come down honestly and whoop up when we were at Oklahoma, and we'd see, you know, Butler would come down to, like, I grew up going to the Jamboree in Stillwater because it's like a mile from the house. So I would see Butler all the time. They'd always have some Kenyans or whatever that were really, really good that were up there with Arkansas and Oklahoma State. So so I had a little bit of awareness, but you know, once we got in it, and I know you were in it for a little while, it was like, oh, this is real. Like this, the Jayhawk conference was real. There was some really good stuff. You know, when you were there, Lance and I mean, Garden City was good back there with Dave, and there were some good people when I first got in. And I got in there and I was about 24 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. So, you know, but it was good for me because like I inherited, you know, a bunch of nice kids that, you know, just smattering of things. Like I had a 6'5" high jumper guy and like a 56-second girl. And it's just kind of all over the place. There wasn't like any semblance of like, this is what identity, you know, whatever identity was. So over the course of time, I was able to develop an identity of who I was in coaching there. You know what I mean? So it was really good for me. It was probably forced me to learn at the right pace, if that makes any sense as a coach.
Well, the interesting thing that you said a lot of interesting things, but one of the things that caught my ear there was you said you knew you probably had to start at the junior college level to work your way up, whether it's networking, knowledge, things like that. That's a sign of humility. Where does that come from? Because that, you know, I'm not sure I hear a lot of 22, 23-year-old people who want to get into coaching that say, hey, I know I need to learn. They say, you know, I need to learn, but I'm going to do it at the Division I level right off the bat. I'm going to be the head assistant coach at Florida State right off the bat. And it's like, bro, you can't even spell that. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, maybe it was the fact that I went to a Division II. Maybe I was just an okay athlete. I don't know what it is behind me. Maybe my dreams weren't really big enough or whatever. I remember thinking, man, if I could make about $50,000, that'd be great.
Loaded,
coaching.
Right?
What a great, and when I took that $10,000 a year job, that was right in line with that. But you know, like I think it was just realistic. Like I knew that I didn't know everything. You know, and I think not to knock on younger coaches, et cetera. I think a lot of people come in and think that they're going to change the world and they have all the answers and all that kind of stuff. And I love the energy of it if they could just channel it towards the education part and understand the humility part of understanding like, hey, like that guy's been coaching for 25 years. He's probably, you know, forgot about kids that he coached that are the best kid I've ever coached. You know what I mean? So, you know, and I've been just kind of fortunate from that aspect to just kind of take things in. I always say this a lot. I'm a third kid. So I watch my brothers mess up a lot. So I kind of take from that, like I just kind of watch other people and I'm an observer, which I think is probably one of my better coaching qualities, just not saying, just watching what's going on around me.
Were parents or those brothers or anybody else family teachers in education? Because you definitely, you seem like you would have been, you at least understand the power of education.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of that luxurious junior college job. I did my fair share of teaching there as well. Kind of blends into my coaching style is that when I was at Barton, which was after Butler, I wasn't full-time teacher, but I was teaching about 9 hours each semester or whatever. Yeah, my dad is a systems analyst, computer guy, not a huge people person. God bless him. And my mom was a phlebotomist, so like draw people's blood. So no idea where, but
yeah.
My brothers and I are all different. My sister's different. Like we're all pretty well spaced out. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, brother.
Yeah,
So,
we're combinations. I mean, there's little parts of all of that. Yeah, that's cool. All right, so talk to us about Butler. You know, I think you know, I did 1 year of junior college coaching, and you know, I talk about it how instrumental it was for me. Like I still, my favorite meet in the, I've been blessed to be able to go to a lot of big meets throughout the country. My favorite meet is still the junior college national meet. I love junior college level on the athletic side. I love that, these are kids that, are getting second, third, sometimes fourth chances. I know, me personally, I'm not sitting in the role that I sit in as a husband and a father, and what I do here at Gill and inside the coaching community without second, third, fourth, fifth chances. Thank goodness people gave me a lot of chances. And so I look at these kids, I look at these coaches, and I'm just like, oh man, this is what sport is about. It's kids that were, whether they were overlooked, whether they were underdeveloped, whether they had grade issues, whatever, and they get another chance and they get to move on in the educational world. And, we've had some amazing coaches there. Talk to us about your time specifically at Butler, and then where, maybe you go after that as well, since it is in the same.
Sure. Well, for me, it was really educational just from, that was definitely not my background. You know what I mean? Like, it was really educational for me to kind of take in people's different backgrounds, where they came from, and sort of, it definitely shaped me as a coach, like being more accepting and understanding. And, for me, a lot of times in my early days, I would gladly admit that, like, I had sort of a, why can't you just do this mentality, not in coaching necessarily, but like, why can't you just go to class? Why can't you just, and so again, I think it was just, I started to learn what the actual job was in junior college, like that it wasn't coaching. The coaching was like the bonus, that the other stuff, getting to know them as human beings, holding them accountable, doing all the things, being the mom, the dad, all the different things that they needed you to be outside of a coach, was definitely what I learned when I was at Butler. Like absolutely, I needed to learn more of that, understand, because like I knew I needed to educate myself on the X's and O's, but I think like it came home, that I needed to be more educated on how to deal with a variety of different problems. Because I always say junior college experience, like 3 years in junior college is 10 years in Division I, with the level of things that just happen. I don't know how else to say that, but there's just a high volume of stuff that comes up on a day-to-day basis. So, I think that prepared me to kind of like, things happen in this job and you just go, okay. And then you work your way through it, and so I think that part was really good for me there. When I enjoyed my time there. Kirk Hunter took a risk on me. I was nobody at the time. So he gave me a job, which I tremendously appreciated. And I was able to kind of do some things, despite the fact that I was competing against Lance at and some of the other guys we talked about. Luckily, Lance took the Arkansas job, and that kind of opened things up for me a little bit. And I know Lyle Lashley. He's a good, very, very, very good friend of mine. He hired me at Barton, and he told me basically, I'm losing recruits to you. There's no reason I should lose recruits to Butler. How about you just come over here and work for me? So
those Barton guys had a certain attitude. Yeah, they backed it up, but
yeah, no, but it made sense, to be honest with you. It was sort of like, look, it'd be easier for me to hire you than keep fighting against you. So, but also like, that was his personality too. So, but yeah, I worked for him for a short time, and then I took over as the head coach there. And I think sort of my timeline has worked itself out in the right way for me, in that, like, was not ready to be a coach at Barton in 2001, but I probably was in 2005. If that makes any sense. So it kind of worked itself out. And when I got to Barton, what I loved about those kids was, and I don't know if the kids are still the same way now, but what I love about junior college kids in general is that if you give them $30 in a sack lunch and treat them right, they'll run through a wall for you. You know what I mean? Like, they don't need all of the stuff to be successful. We didn't have a track at the time, really, that you could run 30 meters in a straight line. Like, we just didn't. Like, we had holes in the track. My last year, we were building it right before I left. And so I'm happy that those kids have that stuff now. But man, I wouldn't trade it for anything. That group of people at Barton kind of shaped me to who I am. Like, my assistant coach, Dave, working with Lyles, and Dave is still there. He's the longest tenured head coach in Barton County history, which is pretty entertaining to me. But it, like, those kids were just passionate about everything. They were easy to motivate, because they understood what they did or did not have to go back to. They understood what we were trying to do. They understood what we cared about them. They understood that, like, hey, this is not hard. I'm hard on you, but this is not hard. What happens if you don't make it is hard. And so, it was a good time.
One of the aspects of junior college recruiting that, I try to stress on people, when you're a high school coach and one of your goals is to get your kids recruited to it doesn't matter what division, to get recruited to the next level, that's hard. There's a lot of work that goes in that. When you are a 4-year college coach, you're always recruiting athletes to your program. That's hard. That really, there's complexities to that. A junior college coach is consistently doing both. They're always recruiting kids to the team, and you're always trying to get your kids recruited to the next level. How did you, I think sometimes people think recruiting and quote unquote good recruiting is all about personality. There is technique, there is philosophies. How did you navigate, because you went straight into the junior college world of recruiting on both those sides? How did you navigate, learn, make mistakes? How did you handle the recruiting side? And you started some international recruiting as well, which is its own, that's different than domestic recruiting.
Yeah, like it was obviously the way I recruited in junior college and the way I recruit now, the way I recruited at Oklahoma, et cetera. It's all evolved. It's all changed completely. In junior college at the time, there was a handful of good options that you could go to. So that kind of narrowed the playing field. Back in those days, we could offer, at max, we could offer tuition and books. And then we were just kind of trying to make it happen. And so for us, it was like trying to provide a lifeline. I remember we had Ivory Williams at Butler, actually. And a lot of people don't know he started out there. And I went and saw him play football against Adrian Peterson. And was dumb enough to think, well, maybe I get both these guys, right? So Adrian obviously went straight to Oklahoma. And Ivory was going to go to Arkansas and then ended up having to go JUCO route. We had football at Butler, so it was an option because he was trying to do football on a track. Right. And I remember going to see him in the fall and giving him my card and giving it to his mom and saying, hey, you don't want my card. I guarantee you don't want my card right now. You have no dreams or aspirations of ever attending Butler Community College. But when you need my card, you better have my card. And so I need you to just put this wherever you need to keep it, whatever. My phone rang in August the next year, and he was on my campus 5 days later. So it was a lot of times it was like I established a little bit of a relationship. Then I would call him about once every 2 months. Hey, how's it going? And then, just the smallest amount of a relationship where that, if they needed a place to go, I was a windfall for them. And that wasn't what I used with everybody, but you read the room, you figure out where you want to go and where it's going to take you. And so different things like that. Tabari Henry was another good one that ended up being all right. I think he's been on your podcast.
Yeah.
He was a guy that had been out for a year or whatever, needed a place to go. I ended up taking his cousin too, because somewhere to go. He's ended up some of what I'm most proud about in those Barton days is Romero's jumps coach at South Florida. Tabari's now at Alabama. I'm going to forget somebody here. Justin Anderson is at Alabama State, and I just hired Tony as my women's sprint assistant here. Those guys are on the same team together, and with Alonzo Edward and Ryan Brathwaite. And there's some good people that were either really passionate about track and field that were there or really good at track and field or both. It was kind of a good time, but yeah, it evolved. I tell a lot of the guys that started out in junior college coaching when they go to Division I, you're not just recruiting for junior college now. You gotta adjust, you gotta shift your game, so now you're recruiting against me. Now you're recruiting against Mouse. Now you're recruiting against Dennis. Now you're recruiting against Dwayne. There's Carol, there's some great recruiters, great coaches, great people, great options, and so I was very much selling myself and the pro history of Barton. This can take you where you want to go. Right. And now here, you can sell the history, you can sell the weather, you can sell the facilities, you can sell great top 20 institution. There's all these different things that you can sell that are a little bit different. And, so you just have to evolve with whatever school you're at and, what the identity is going to be.
It's funny that you recruited Ivory because I recruited Ivory at Mississippi State as well.
Yep.
And I tell people this a lot because I did a home visit with him, and it stuck out to me because his mom made food for us, and that on TV and movies it seems like that happens every home visit. That's just not true. At least my experience, no one ever actually made food, but Ivory's
Yeah,
mom
yeah,
did, and it was amazing. Like I was like,
yeah,
oh, I was like, you need a second home visit? I was like, Coach, can I go visit Ivory and his folks again, man? But
yeah,
really enjoyed his family, his mom, and Ivory was great too. I really did
yeah. Good people.
like Ivory. Did you? And maybe you recruited differently. I was known as a recruiter, but it's not like I, you know, evolutionized the way of recruiting. But one of the drawbacks that I had mentally, and I think it was looking back, it wasn't maybe a little bit during the time, but definitely looking back, I felt like I said the way I always described it was I felt like a shark. And here's what I meant. What I mean by that is, I wasn't, and maybe it's different today. We've had Philip Redrick on the podcast at Fort Scott, and he expressed a little bit of a different philosophy of recruiting, and that's awesome. It's obviously working for him. He's doing an amazing job there at Fort
Yeah,
Scott. Fort Scott was non-existent when we were there. There was no, I mean,
yeah, yeah,
when I say non-existent, like we did not consider Neosho was not very good at all, and we were like, does Fort Scott even have a team? And that's so Philip has done an amazing job there. But what I mean when I say felt like a shark, so I was after, I unofficially, I did not actually do this, but I put Lance Brahman's face on a dartboard and was like, I'm going after Barton, because that was just my mentality of like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it to the highest of levels, right? And so I looked at his team and was like, all right, well, it looks like only the top 10 kids out of high school are going to his team. That's what I need to go after. So, I made a target list, the old die stat days. I went and looked at the recruits, right? And so I'd start calling the schools and saying, hey, basically the first thing I wanted to know was I already knew they were good athletes. I didn't have to worry about that part. I didn't really care about their attitude, mainly a little bit, some out of naivety, but also a little bit out of like, well, if they got a bad attitude, maybe I'm the person that's going to help them. Maybe I'm the mentor for them. But I needed their grades to be bad. And what I mean by that is, they're top 10. They're going to sign with Oklahoma and Miami and Florida State if they had grades. They didn't need me, to your point about, you don't want my card. And so I remember, like, I distinctly remember Tiffany Ross, I think. She ended up going to South Carolina. I called their school, I called their counselor up, and I was like, I'm just trying to find out her grades, because if she has good grades, you'll never hear from me again. And she was like, oh, yeah, she's like a 3 point something. And I was like, oh, and I like, for me, there was a little bit of relief, like, oh, like, good. You don't want to go
right.
through junior college if you don't have to. But if you have to, there's options. So I felt a little like I'd get the old fax days, I'd get a transcript and it'd be 3.0 and 18 on the ACT. And it was like, all right, well, I just throw it away. It's like, well, that kid's going somewhere. I needed that
Yeah,
1 point and that 12 ACT. And it felt, I don't want to use the word icky, but it felt, I don't know, not great.
yeah, yeah. We tried to do. I mean, at Barton, I tried to do a little bit of a balance, but a lot of what you said rings true. I mean, there was a lot of time you're like, that kid's going Division 1, but somebody's
Yeah.
going to take him. But I think there was sometimes like because in certain events in junior college were a little easier, you probably trick yourself into thinking somebody is worth more than they are at the Division 1 level than what they are. Like a 150 guy in junior college is really good, and a 150 guy in Division 1 is got room for improvement. We'll just say so. And so like that's a bit of it. And we would trying to do also is balance the Kansas kids and the out of state kids, because as you know, like I'm sure every place had their different stuff, but we had semi unlimited money for Kansas kids and no one to give it to, and then we had limited money for the international kids and the out of state kids. And so we would try and find the kids, the diamonds in the rough, more so with the in-state kids. You know what I mean? And so we would try and balance that out a little bit. Not that we had a ton, but we had some good kids, some good jumpers that we got out of Leavenworth and that area and Junction City, things like that we would get that were solid students that were maybe overlooked.
Mhm.
There was a lot of kids we would get that would come in, jump at 23 feet and leave, jump at 26.
Yeah,
And
I agree. And the problem with that is, Kansas, a great state for track and field, by the way, when
yeah,
when you parse it out with the population, but has umpteen million track programs. So not only do you
yeah,
have all those Jayhawk, the JUCO conferences, I mean, you got great schools, Fort Hays, Wichita State, obviously KU, Kansas State.
yeah,
You had a bazillion other options for kids in a small. So I agree with you, but it was like, oh man, I'm up against 30 other schools just for in-state if it's that
yeah.
alone.
And that's what I meant kind of by the unlimited scholarships. It wasn't that we had so many scholarships, is that there was not going to be 15 kids every single year from the state of Kansas that were going to pick one of 30 schools, right? Like, you could make an argument that we may have been the best one track and field wise, but then again, it goes back to is this the best total program and everything else that that we had to offer and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it was a different experience for sure. And it shaped me into who I am. It made me a much better coach off the track more than anything else. Was my time. And, things I learned from Lyles, even though we only worked together for a short time, but like we lived basically across the street from each other for 4 years. So like that, that guy's an unsung hero of, he won 31 national championships, I think, during his time in junior college as a team. So like he's the type of guy that you give him a football, he's going to win. You give him a basketball, he's going to win. He's a coach, like a true coach. And, I watched him take over a program in Ellenwood High School, and they were not that good. I know because my wife was the coach the year before, and he took over that program and like got kids out, and like that's because he's such an engaging personality. He gets all these kids out, and then he develops them and he holds them accountable and he makes them do things they didn't think they could do. You know what I mean? Like he just turns them into good athletes. That's a skill. Like I've always been in awe. I don't know that I'm anywhere near the level of coach that he is when it comes to that aspect of coaching. When like he just is a guy that can get the most out of people. So
yeah, I've made that example, and specifically track coaches, and Lyles would be one of those. There's certainly X's and O's, but there's greater to coaching, leadership and engagement and things like that. And I've always said, the really good track coaches, and I'm not talking about the X's and O's guys and gals. I'm talking about the good they have programs that succeed year after year after year, decade after decade. You could put them in any sport, regardless if they know how the X's and O's.
Yep.
Like they could become Lyles could be a hockey coach. And I'm pretty sure that hockey team would be pretty good fairly soon. First of all, he'd know who to hire. He would know how to talk to the kids. He'd figure out the X's and O's. That'd be like 4th on his priority list. He knows all the other things that he would have to get done. And they'd be pretty good, even though, and I don't know, maybe Lyles is a great hockey player for all I know, but some sport that he doesn't know about.
I don't think they played a lot of hockey in Louisiana, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, but he went to Kansas a lot. So, they do have hockey there. In Alabama.
Yeah, he's got a low center of gravity, so that might be.
I didn't say he had to play it really well. Maybe he's a big fan. I don't know. Yeah. I grew up in Alabama where we didn't even say the word hockey because there was no hockey back then. There's a little bit now, but I had no clue about hockey. All right, so junior college. Before we go from junior college to the next step and find out why, talk to me about you had, and I think it might have been your last year at Barton. Maybe you had just really an amazing world championships, and we don't hear those two things necessarily together. Junior college coach, world championships, but you did something or was really close. You give me the real skinny here from my memory of what some of your athletes did there at the world champs.
Yeah, it was a pretty special year. I remember, I'll just kind of walk you through how to play it out. Like, so I had Ryan Brathwaite, who ended up winning the world championship in the 110 hurdles. Alonzo Edward got silver medal behind Bolt when he broke the world record. Right. And Tabari was 4th in the 400 that year. So 1st, 2nd, and 4th, I've disowned Tabari for not getting me a clean sweep on the medals, but it's fine. It was a wild year, man. Like it was one of those situations where I remember it being in April and feeling really, really good about where we were at as a team, trying to win a national championship. We didn't win that year, by the way. We lost to South Plains, Blaine Wiley, and Blaine was an assistant then, but Chris Bean was the head coach then. There were some really, really good 2 or 3 teams. Ren Lake was also good then. Anyway, but I remember in April and like these guys hadn't lost races. And so there was a weird year. There was like an extra year or extra weekend year. Like, you get those every once in a while. There's like, I've got an extra weekend here. I don't have anything on my schedule. So I heard about a meet happening in Texas, the Longhorn Invite. And I'm like, I'm gonna go down there and see if we can get beat. So I literally loaded up those 3 guys, my wife in a van, and we drove down. As you probably can attest to, like this was a Coach Kane funded event that we went down to. And I was like, let's just see if we can lose, and Tabari goes and runs the first race, I think, and he beats, I think Tyson and Wallace are running the quarter for some reason. Lionel Larry was in there. He was a defending NCAA champion. Anyways, he wins, runs 45-0 or whatever. And then the next event is the 110 hurdles. And Ryan Brathwaite runs 13:05, and crickets. Like nobody even knew how fast that was. Like 17 people in the stands, and like Lance Brahman was there actually with Steve Mullins and a couple other people, and Tyson. And so then Alonzo Edward comes up to me and it was like, Coach, I got you. We're fine. I got you. I'm like, okay. His little kid, man, I would go to battle with him anytime. So he was 19 years old. He hops in, and the people in the race at the time was like Tyree Gale was really good. You would remember he was a JUCO guy that went to Texas Tech. Gerald Fury was in there. Aaron Armstrong, an old Barton guy. Um, Mike Rogers, who ended up winning the U.S. championship, was in there. And Alonso just gets out there, just blows them away at 60 and runs 997. And it was like, I remember it vividly because Jim Van Ottingen called me on like maybe Tuesday after that and was like, I don't think you'll ever have a meet that good the rest of your life. And I was like, we'll see. You know, like, I hope I have something better than that, but whatever. So then fast forward to the World Championships and we went 1-2-4. So I remember calling Jim like,
That's a little
we
better.
might have had a little bit better, but it was, you know, it was unbelievably lucky, unbelievably fortunate. Like everything, I was stumbling through how to sort of go into the pro world, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. With you know, Tabari was wanting to continue going to school. The other two were very much interested in not going to school. So trying to balance that so that we didn't do anything we weren't supposed to do. Also getting the races that were necessary for all of them to prepare for the World Championships. I was a fan at that point. I was very new to how to navigate those waters. So it was interesting, like for sure.
How did you, it's kind of a two-part question. One is that, how did you know, I hate to say you're this little old junior college, but I mean, you're in the middle of freaking nowhere, Kansas here. Let's be for real. You're not in big city. Like, not that that's a prereq to coach someone to world champs, but the process and going to the world champs and Usain's there. I mean, that's a whole different stage. That, and how did you, and maybe you didn't, like, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes as a, you know, you're 26 at this time, you're mid-20s at this time.
It's about 30. Yeah,
All right.
31.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're young. Okay. Put me as a 30-year-old. That's when I came here to Yale.
Yeah.
If I remember when I got to Mississippi State and was working some great, you know, we had Pierre Brown, Marquise Day. I mean, I had some pretty fast kids. You know, Steve Mullins was with us there the next year. Trey Hart. I mean, you know, I had some, you know, people that other people knew. That's probably the prereq, right? I was at Ball State. I had some really great girls and one really, really great girl, but no one knew them, right? At Mississippi State, people knew the people that I was working with. That's kind of like the calling cards, like, oh, yeah, that's how good. And I had some, I would say ego's not bad, bad ego's bad. I had some bad ego. I had some, you know, feeling myself of like, I'm a thing now. Like, I'm better than a lot of people because look at the kids I'm working with and all this kind of stuff. How did you keep that bad ego in check, or did you?
Uh, you know, I'd like to think I did. I probably didn't. I don't know. You know, like um, I just, I think in the whole process of everything, like you realize how lucky you are when you have success. You know, like how easily it could go the other direction. But you know, sometimes when you're a little bit naive, you don't know how good you're not, and you just keep rolling down the train tracks and see what happens. You know, I remember like laying in bed thinking, I think these guys could medal, like out loud, like in my brain, like a month before they got medals. You know, but I didn't know anything. I'm just trying to like play it out. If we do this, if we do that, and try and prepare them. Again, I was trying to not screw it up. I didn't want to be the weak link, you know, and so that was part of me just kind of stepping up my game, talking to other people. You know, like Lance was a pretty good resource at that time as far as like how to navigate the pro stuff. And he's always, you know, like without really truly being a mentor, we don't really talk X's and O's ever really. It's more like just people, if that makes any sense, like how to navigate the political landscape. And Raina Ryder was a guy that I had known. Like so interesting fact. Raina Ryder was Chris Weilert's, my GA, Chris Weilert's junior college coach in California at Riverside.
No, is
Yeah, I
that
forgot about that
right?
detail. Yeah, so I've known Raina through Chris since I don't know 90 or something like that, 2000 when Raina was at K State. Anyway, so like, we had like a little bit of a relationship. When I was at Barton, he was at K State as well, and so obviously K State was trying to recruit. And then he went to Florida, and again, still trying to recruit our kids and all that kind of stuff. So I had a little bit of learning how to navigate those waters from the agents and all the different stuff. And,
Right.
so like I had no idea what I was doing from that aspect. I was terrified I was going to screw that up for the kids. I had more confidence in my ability to coach, but I was still terrified I was going to screw that up for the kids. So it was just more, I don't know that I mean, I probably was arrogant. I'm sure I was. I still am, whatever. But I definitely was more interested in not being the weak link in the whole process. So I think that's what kind of fuels me every time. When I got here and I had Trey Cunningham, he was not my fast and still is not my fast hurler, but
Right.
it's his one chance. So I don't want to be the weak link. I don't want to be the reason he doesn't achieve all of his goals, And so I think that's kind of where I get myself into situations a lot is I make sure that I'm doing everything I possibly can do. And I'm not perfect by any means. I screw it up a lot, but I try my hardest to make sure that I'm giving them everything they need to be successful, whoever it is.
I hope I would have learned by, my age today. But I tell you, if I'd have had the success you had in that first decade of coaching, you couldn't have talked to me. I'd have been like, whatever, man. Where am I
Well,
speaking to next? What book am I writing? I mean, I'd have been,
I am certain that I was probably not fun to be around on a regular basis. But I also look back on it and I'm like, how much of me being naive was why we were successful? How much of it was me being a little bit arrogant why we were successful? And I know that I'm a much better coach than I was in 2009. Like I know a lot more than I did then.
right.
And I've had some success since then. But I still look back like how much of that was just the right person at the right time. And
Yeah.
this is kind of how it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think if maybe a more experienced me might have screwed it up. I don't know. So and maybe I would have been more in tune with how good you actually need to be to win, that I would have screwed it up. We need to be doing this, or we need to be doing that, or we need to be doing that, and driven them off the tracks. I just let them go down the tracks.
Yeah. That's a really good point though that you bring up. We talk about our knowledge levels and naivety and things like that. And it's like, yeah, but maybe well, it's kind of several parts to it. One is like, well, the combination that happened that year in those years were the right combinations. So your level where you were and them. And it's easy to think, and a lot of times we do this, oh man, well, if I knew what I knew today back then, like how good they could have been. Well, we forget
Yep.
that the other side could also have happened. Well, if I did know as much as I do now today back then, well, I could have easily overdriven or overthought it. There's a lot of things, and they
Yeah.
could have not been as good that they ended
Yeah.
up becoming.
Yeah. Well, you kind of nailed one thing on the head too. Like it's not just me in that relationship. Like Ryan, they were not just teammates; they were roommates. Like junior college roommates, which means you shared a bunk bed. So like real roommates. And so they were super competitive. So the 200 meters was 20 minutes before the 110 hurdles at the World Championships. And so when Alonso got a silver, I was like, there's no way Ryan's not winning. Like, there's no way. And Ryan, like, look, he won by 0.02 and had to beat Terrence Trammell and David Payne. And it was a lean. Like, there was 0.02 between first and third. Like, it was a phenomenal race. But at no point after Alonso got the medal, I was like, oh, we're good. Like that, I knew because it was that simple for them. It's like, I'm not getting left out. I'm definitely getting a medal. And it's probably going to be gold because they definitely were competitive during that time. So, those type of things matter,
I was about to say, and
especially with
that's
JUCO kids, man. It's like a competitive nature.
and that's you hit the nail on the head. I was going to say, and that's part of the equation that we don't think about. Ryan goes to
Yep.
some other school with quote unquote a better coach. It's not guaranteed that this actually plays out the way we know it plays out. It could have been better, could have been worse as well. Teammate factor, et cetera. Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. All right, so where do we go? You have a banner year. If I was in your chair, your shoes, no one could talk to me because I'd been the greatest thing since sliced bread. You handled it a lot better than I would have. Where do we go next and why?
Go to the University of Oklahoma because they gave me a job interview. I honestly had applied that was my 17th place Division I wise that I had applied in the 9 years that I had been in junior college, and they were the first one to give me an actual interview. So Martin Smith.
My first question before that is, does Dad still talk to you? Because you talked about if you'd went to Oklahoma, Dad would never even talk to you.
Yeah, when I got the job, he literally said, "I'm really proud of you, but if you wear that shit in the house, sorry, if you wear that shit in the house, we're gonna have a problem."
You could be the OU coach out there, but inside this house.
Yep. And So it was really funny because he's not really a sports guy, but I don't know, it's a whole thing. If you live in
Yeah.
Stillwater, it's a whole thing. So, but yeah, so I took the job at Oklahoma. Martin Smith, who I love, gave me an opportunity. That staff there, by the way, like I talked about this when I was hiring my staff here. Check this out. So Martin Smith just won the Hall of Fame. Brian Blutrick, arguably the best throws coach in the country. Jeremy Fisher, great jumps coach, works out at the training center. Dana Boone, head coach at UCF, phenomenal job. I actually talk about what a great job when she put her staff together at Texas State. If you look at the staff she put together there, Keith Hurston, Greg Watson,
Yeah.
my man Giles at Oklahoma State. I mean, like I respect people that put those staffs together. Myself, I'm forgetting somebody, but I mean, if you just look at that staff that was there, like it was Martin did a phenomenal job of piecing together. He would call journeyman, which is a little bit of an interesting. That's Martin was a lot interesting, but he definitely pieced together a really really high powered staff before their time. I think Brian had already done a lot of things, and Jeremy was on the come up, and Dana, same thing. She's done a great job as a head coach. So it was a lot of fun, but it was new. I went from being a head coach to being one. So that was an interesting experience for me too. So I was the one new guy on the staff, and it was my first time in Division I as an athlete or as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking it all in. I was naive. I did, probably real dumb shit there. So just from interacting on a staff, knowing what to do, following, directives of my boss, there was a lot of different things, but I had fun there. Like it was home-ish for me. Had some success there. Ronnie Ash transferred in.
So I'd forgotten Ronnie had transferred in. And earlier you said something that kind of surprised me. You said Trey Cunningham was not your fastest hurdler. And, I'm a little bit biased towards Trey because, same last name. We're both from Alabama. This third one's a little hard to say. We're both hurdlers. I hurdled a little in high school, so I just count myself as a hurdler. That's where all the it's all different after that. He's way faster, better looking, much better person than I am, yada yada. So I just thought Trey was your fastest guy, but you mentioned Ronnie transferred in, and earlier you talked about Ryan. Was one of those two your fastest hurdler?
Sort of a technicality. So technically, I guess 13:00 win legal is my fastest with Trey. 12:98, I think was like a 2.1 or something insignificant. And then Ryan was Ronnie, and then Ryan ran like 13:05 with like a 2.2 at Texas. Back when that was nobody even realized how fast that was that day. But yeah, it was I mean, as you know, like the win is actually kind of hurts rather than helps once you get over about 1.5, but especially when you're going that fast. But anyway, but yeah, like obviously I think with Trey, I mean, not to jump ahead necessarily, but he's definitely the most consistent guy I've ever worked with as far as that goes. Like, yeah, I think I went back and looked, and this is very much a compliment towards Terrence Trammell, not a detriment, but like it's a compliment to the year that Trey had. But like Trey's 10th fastest time that year was Terrence Trammell's 10th fastest time of his life. And Terrence Trammell is a guy I hold in great regard as a hurdler. It was a tremendous career. 6, 7, 8 medals. I don't know how many silver medals he got or whatever. He got second to Ryan that year in 2009, anyway, so like certainly Trey is the most consistent of all the people, particularly that 2022 year.
Yeah, certainly. As us hurdle guys, Terrence Trammell, we bowed down. I mean, no,
man,
which a little bit of a tangent here,
especially if you're our age. Terrence and Allen were the guys.
Yeah, and that's what I was surprised. This is gonna be. We'll get back to Oklahoma here in a second. I was surprised. I'm a huge Grant Holloway fan as well. Obviously, from his coach Mouse, and Grant's just like a super nice guy. A lot like Trey, actually. I'm always amazed that when these athletes like actually know me and interact with me, because I'm like, sure, I don't do anything for I don't coach anymore. I'm not an agent, whatever. You're not trying to get shoes from me, those kind of things. But Trey and Grant both have been like excessively nice to me, both online and in person, which blows me away. But Grant's, just recently ran the most sub-13s ever, and that surprised me. I know he's been good and all, but I grew up with Allen and Terrence and oh my gosh, of course I'm blanking, but the who's who of hurdling. A lot of guys, and I was like, wow, Grant already? Like it just surprised me.
Well, he's been good. I mean, Grant's been at the top, world ranking #1 for what, 5, 6 years now,
Mhm.
which is rare in this event. Like if you peel it back from before Grant, everybody had a really good 18 months. Like if you really go back, look at the previous world champions, there were barely any defending world champions. Going back to Ryan and before Ryan, and there's a lot of guys that had really good, they're good careers for sure, but they were really hot for 18 months. And Grant's been able to stay at the top for a really, really long time. So, it's a hard guy to not respect. He's a good dude too. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I
yeah.
uh I think that's the thing is I'm getting older because when you just said he's been world ranked number 1 for 5, 6 years, I'm like, no, he just graduated college last year. Like,
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
surprised me. And it's like, oh no, he has been out for 5 to 6 years. It just surprises me.
All right, well, let's get back on track here, pun intended. And we left off with Oklahoma. So you just got to
Yeah.
Oklahoma. You're the new person on the staff. This is your first. No, I'm not even going to say it that way. This is your first Division I job. How
Yeah.
how did you acclimate to the new recruiting, new everything?
Yeah, it was different. Like it was not only was it my first job, but it was Division I wise, but I wasn't a Division I athlete, so like everything was wildly different for me. So you always have this like in your mind what it's going to be like, and then you get on a staff and it's different, like it always is going to be a little bit different, but it was great. It was educational for me. I had some good people to learn from. It was a little bit of the staff was organized in a little bit different way, so it was kind of a lot of independent people working together, if that makes any sense. Like, Jeremy had his group and Brian had his group and Dana had her group. And we kind of, me coming from junior college, that was easy, because I just had always been doing my own thing. And then we kind of all came together when it mattered. We had a bunch of really good coaches. So that model kind of worked, you know what I mean? And, it was good. Like Martin is Martin. Martin is a Hall of Fame character, Hall of Fame coach. I love him, like he could be a challenge, but man, I love Martin. And so, I learned a lot from him about just general coaching. I actually really enjoyed watching his training sessions, to be honest with you. Like I just kind of found some of the stuff that he did really interesting in his training. I would watch these guys not run very fast in training and then all of a sudden run really fast in a race. And I was always enamored by the fact that they could run 51-second 300s and somehow run 357 or whatever. You're like, it's like a women's time in my mind. And but they're going out, breaking four when breaking four was still a deal. So it was a lot of stuff. And I thought he was also really interesting and innovative for an older guy that was doing a lot of plyometrics and core and different things that I did not expect from an old school distance coach. You know what I mean? So, but he's a brilliant guy. So he was a good guy to work for. So
Now that I think about it, because I'd forgotten the Martin connection between you and I as well. I think I helped set you up to get that job. And what I mean by that is one of my I revere Martin Smith is when I was at Neosho. So after my first season, before I actually, because of Martin, I went to Ball State.
yeah,
He was hiring a sprint hurdles coach at Oregon. And I did, and this is very I shouldn't say pre-internet, but early days internet, email, things like that. I thought that'd be the greatest job in the world. And I had,
sure.
no common sense that I was not ready for that job, but I just blitzed him. Everybody that I knew, I asked to send a referral, a reference.
Yeah.
And one day in my office in little old Chanute, Kansas, I get this, and we didn't have caller ID. I just got this, I don't know what number this is. And I answer and he goes, hey, is this Mike? This is Martin Smith from Oregon. And I was like, holy crap. And he was like, hey, he goes, I feel like I have to interview you for the job. Do you know how many people have called me, email? And I was like, oh my God, it worked. And so
That
he
also sounds
interviewed
like a very Martin thing to say.
he interviewed me and I realized the mistake I made learning later about Martin and kind of holistic track and field team, and he ended up hiring some guy named Steve Sylvie. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm sure he had to go to a second choice from me and went to Steve, I guess. But I probably helped him understand. Oh, these JUCO coaches are probably pretty good. So when you were interviewing, he's probably like, oh, this guy, I get it because I interviewed Mike Cunningham. So now I get that.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
So talk to us about Oklahoma. I remember watching from the sidelines. I remember, we saw each other in Texas relays one year and stuff. A fun time. You seem to have acclimated really well quickly.
I was from there, so that partly was a bit of it. That was part of the draw. Well, first of all, you gave me an interview, which is a big draw. And second of all, I was from there. I had some, family stuff going on, so it was actually a really good time for me to go closer to home, and things of that nature. So, it was good. But I was only there like 18 months, to be honest with you. Like, it was fun. We were good. The women did a really nice job. I think they finished fourth my last year there. Like Dana and Brian were a big part of, they were a massive part of making all that happen. And they scored a lot of points and made a lot of happen. It was a lot. So it was a lot of fun. It was kind of like the early days. A lot of those throwers that Brian had that kind of went on to make Olympic teams and stuff like that. It was kind of neat to get to know those people and whatnot. And from my end, Mookie Salam kind of emerged from nowhere. He was an Oklahoma kid that his freshman year before I got there, I don't think he made a Big 12 final. And then his next year, he won the 100 and 200. And the following year, he was, national champ indoors and ran 9.9 and whatever, So, like, it was kind of fun to kind of see that progression with him. And there's a bunch of other guys that were there. A couple of guys followed me from Barton. Hardlers and a quarter miler, Romero, followed me from Barton to Oklahoma. And it was good. And then, kind of Alabama just sort of happened. I'd known Waters for a very long time through recruiting and a variety of other things. And he got hired at Alabama, and it's Alabama. I don't know. So I just, hopped in a car and found a new place to live.
You mentioned Mookie, and what I thought about immediately from him, because we talked about with Tabari and Romero. Here's another guy that went on to coach track. I mean,
he's coaching at Oklahoma right now.
Yeah. That to me is a pretty big hallmark for a coach. I always say 99.9%, well, maybe for you 99% of your athletes are not going to go on to pro, or if you're high school, they're not going to go on to college. Most don't. But they're all going to go on to be moms and dads and business owners and coaches and teachers. And you have for people who have, they must have had some kind of good experience with you that they thought, oh man, I want to be that. I'd like to go coach track. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, I there was a time in junior college when, I'm going to get the number wrong, but it was something like 10 or 11 kids, they weren't kids, but they were kids in junior college. There were 10 or 11 coaches in junior college or Division I that I had coached. At Barton, they were all on the same team together.
Wow.
So, that's pretty impactful to me. Like, it just means that time that we had there was really special. It was, it's impactful in their life. That's the real job that I figured out when I was in junior college, is understanding the opportunities that we're able to provide those kids. That I didn't realize when I was 23 years old, that is what the real job was, But yeah, like it's kind of awesome to see now. It was great to see Mookie go back to Oklahoma, because that's where he's from. But to get an opportunity there, it's kind of, I'm happy to see Tabari go to Alabama, because I was at Alabama. Waters was with him at Texas A&M. There's a lot of, that's kind of how this works. But also for him to get an opportunity there. Also with Blaine Wiley, we're very close friends. That was my arch rival at South Plains when I was at Barton. Like, we had a mutual love hatred, probably. Like, we were good, probably because of each other. Like when Tabari ran 44 seconds, LaToya Williams ran 44 seconds. Those type of things were happening in junior college at the time. So it's good to see all those guys getting opportunities, and they put their own, they probably take a little bit of what we were doing, and obviously they make their own way, and it's exciting to watch kind of grow.
How did you, I'm thinking about, like, as assistant coaches, and probably the majority of us, I think this would be a proper statement, the majority of us in coaching careers are going to be assistants for their whole career, and then nothing's wrong with that, but with that, if you go through different programs or whatnot, you're going to have different head coaches that have different priorities, different personalities. Now, I'm on the outside looking in here, but I know a little bit about Martin Smith. I know a little bit about Dan Waters, and I had this distinct memory after you got the Alabama job. I visited pretty recently after that, like maybe the first semester, I think. And I remember sitting in your office, and and I said, hey, so how's it going with Dan? And I knew Dan from recruiting, Neosho and, things like that. So I knew Dan, cursory that way as well. I've gotten to know him a lot more here lately in the last few years and have a lot of respect for him. But I said, hey, so how's it, under Dan, and I think I remember saying, who is a Pat Henry disciple, meaning he learned a lot from Pat Henry. And I've heard, stories, and I don't mean that in a negative way, about Pat and his leadership, all positive. And I remember you reached up and you grabbed this binder, and it was a thick binder. And I immediately said, oh yeah, I had that at Mississippi State, all your school policy. Yeah, exactly. I said, oh yeah, I had that too, Matt. Mississippi State school rules and HR. And you go, oh, no. This isn't from the university. This is from Dan. So knowing, and I don't know, this is where I say I don't know. I'm on the outside. I don't know. Maybe Martin did that as well. But what I'm really getting here is, how did you navigate different head coaches, and even with Bob there at Florida State, how did you navigate different head coaches who had different personalities, different priorities, different maybe expectations of you and your group? How do you I'm gonna say navigate that, but still stay true to who you are as a coach and your own style and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like they're all very different. Like Martin and Bob have a lot of similarities, but if you were to know Martin and Bob as people, they're wildly different. But like the way their management was actually semi-similar. And then obviously Dan was way on an opposite end of the spectrum. So it went from kind of loose, you're kind of the captain of your own ship, to we only have one captain and this is the way we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to do. And I found value in all three of them, to be honest with you. Like, I think that I hope that I can blend all three of them into somebody that's really good. I think that I learned a ton from Dan about recruiting. I learned a ton of Dan about organization, perspective. Sometimes I didn't always appreciate it as much as I probably should have at the time. I can tell you I understand him a lot more in the last 2 months than I did maybe 10 years ago. But no, really good. And Dan's been good to me over the 10 years since I left or whatever. But it's definitely really, when you look at it, it's two guys that'll be definitely Hall of Fame guys, probably three Hall of Fame coaches that I got to work for. So I would be an idiot to not learn from them, and I would be an idiot to not kind of figure out what I could take from them that I could find useful to myself. So I have that book back there that I still have. I did pull the Alabama part out of the binding, but I use that as like a sort of a framework for how would I take some of this and use it for what made sense to me, as you said earlier. Talking about coaching in a way that makes sense or whatever. So I take the organizational part of what Dan was like, which I'm sure he got from Pat and Dennis. Not that he worked with Dennis, but I it's hard for me to still separate those guys. From an organizational standpoint, I think that, like when I go to track meet at LSU, I just look around and I think this is the best practice facility I've ever seen in my entire life, because Dennis is a meticulous guy that has attention to detail like none other. And I respect the hell out of that. So, like those are the type of things that I kind of try and garner from other people that I'm around. And sometimes it's not just the head coaches, like it's assistant coaches. I watched the way Brian operated, Jeremy, Dana. I worked with Miguel Pate, Dick Booth. Those were very wildly different characters, but they all brought something different to the table. Doug Reynolds, I mean, my God. I worked with Doug twice. I convinced him to work with me again. Then I think he had enough and went to Kansas. But no, Doug is like one of my all-time favorites, and his like calm demeanor was probably something that I have tried to move closer towards in my, especially in my head coaching. So,
yeah. I sometimes wonder, I talk a lot about how are we preparing our assistant coaches to become head coaches one day. And I think about that organization and attention to detail. I just remember, Dan one time gave me a really extensive tour of Alabama, showed me all the way through football and everything like that. And I told him the story of Pat Henry. The first year we did nationals was at his now former indoor facility. And so before the meet started, I just wanted to just check in with Pat. It's Pat. I revere Pat. He's a legacy, right? And so I was like, hey, Pat, how's everything? Like, I don't want to bother you. I mean, not only are you hosting, but you're trying to win the thing and all that kind of stuff. And he looks at me and he goes, Mike, you see this box right here? and it was a box that had nothing to do with Trek equipment. So I was kind of like, oh man, does Pat think I did that? Like, I was kind of wondering where this is going. He goes, now we're going to put a skirt around it, but this is where the bugler is going to do the national anthem. And I'm not sure it's tall enough. These are the things I'm concerned about. The presentation. And I was like, where is it? It was a little bit like, man, Pat, I have nothing to do with that. But it helped me kind of get a little bit of an insight of like, oh,
Yep.
this dude is thinking of literally everything. And Dan gave me the story of like when that facility opened up. I think they hosted was it Big 12 or SC, whatever. I think they hosted conference that year. So say again.
They were in the Big 12 back then.
Yeah, Big 12. Yeah, and I think it literally opened like weeks before or something like that. And Dan said he was working to, okay, we got a host and we're trying to win and yada yada. And Pat was like, hey, the stanchions outside for like how the people get into the ticket, they're not set up right. And he was just like, what is this guy talking about? But he himself then was talking about, I had to learn like, oh, everything matters. And if everything matters, then everything will matter. So it's just fascinating. So to me, like I think about what these guys have learned, Pat, Dennis, Dan, like that's the kind of things I wish at like USTFCA and stuff, like Dan would present, hey, here's how, maybe he'd call it the Alabama way, the Waters way is what it really is, because he's certainly tweaked some things that Pat has taught him so that other people see, oh, if I want to be if I want to be a successful head coach, I might need some of these principles that Dan has learned and now, mastered for himself.
Yeah, like I think it's a simple principle. I don't know that Dan ever said these words, but to me, I always just took it as like, if we want to be taken seriously, we have to take ourselves seriously as a sport. Like if we want, and we can, there's a lot of things to complain about for sure if you want to complain, but like if we want to be taken seriously, we have to present ourselves to administrators in a way that we can be taken seriously. And attention to detail is a big part of that. And, figuring out a way to get people on your team to have that same attention to detail is a challenge, but it's something we all got to do.
That's a great point. So how was your time at Alabama and how was it hanging out with Nick Saban?
Oh, it was great. We used to catch beers on Thursdays before the game, go over film. He was great. Obviously, it was great to live in his world. But no, my time at Alabama was really good for me from a coaching perspective. It was really good for me from like I really enjoyed the people we had on our staff. Like we all kind of came together. And I felt like it was Dick obviously had done everything already that we all aspired to. And then, we had kind of myself and Miguel and Doug, like kind of on the rise, if that makes any sense. Like we were continuing to grow together and challenging each other. And we just all kind of clicked, even though we were from wildly different backgrounds and whatnot. So, it was a lot of fun from that aspect. We were not a good team. Frankly, I think you were pretty familiar with that. It was a unique blend of difficult challenges of taking a men's and women's program that were separate and putting them together.
Right.
So they had different leadership styles that they were each accustomed to, and then Dan being a third leadership style, which was completely different from the other two. So we had different problems with different groups and things of that nature. But what I would say about the entire coaching staff is we were coaching our asses off with those kids, like trying to get them better and trying to, close the gap. And we frankly we were last in the SEC, so it's not even about that we weren't that good, but it was the SEC for crying out loud. So we had a long ways to go. I'm really proud of the work that we did there, like getting them off the ground and getting some things going. And I think we were sixth in the nation at maybe my third year there or something. So, it was good. And, I enjoyed working with those guys. That was a whole lot of fun and, kind of continuing to grow as a coach and all that. We had some success. DeAndre Batson was quite good. Obviously, he was a big part of that sixth place team. I think he won the national championship in the 2 and got third in the 60. And then Ramona Birchall kind of came out of nowhere in the 60 and won the national championship out of lane 2, and then went on to win the 100 and broke the collegiate record. Was at that time a long-standing collegiate record at 7:08 or whatever. But there was things like that going on, a lot of fun. I kind of got back into coaching middle distance when I was there. Had some guys run 145, had a girl run 202 that were like, I think the 202 girl ran like 214 at junior college. So there's a lot of like fun coaching that we got to do because we weren't very good. And so we were taking risks on people we thought could be good. So it was a little bit of, we got to coach, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? And it was just a different time. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. So
Besides coaching, I remember this story. I'm pretty sure it was Dan. It was either you, Doug, or Dan, and I think it was Dan. We were sitting together at the Crossplex for a meet. Might have been nationals or something, and he told me about the number of home visits that you guys did. So this is a little bit
yeah,
like a asterisk of be careful what you ask for, think you want, meaning like you think you want to work
yeah,
in the SEC or even Big 12, etc. And if you think you from the outside in, you look at you said Alabama was not a very good team, had some good athletes, but not good team, and you think from the outside you think, oh man, I could make that better so easy by doing X or Y or Z.
yeah,
And then you get into the muck and figure out what it is. I can't remember the number, but it was, I did quite a few home visits when I coached, and it was a number that blew my mind.
Well, we had 106 official visits that year between the men and the women. Like, we brought onto campus, and we had unofficial visitors and all that other stuff. I think we signed something like 54. I do remember we signed 32 on signing day, and a football signed like 24 or 25, and they were like, "What in the world is going on here?" Because they were very unaccustomed. It was fax machine day. So they were very unaccustomed
Right.
to near the fax machine outside of themselves. So I think by doing that, I think that opened up our relationship with football and opened up our relationship with other sports, because they were like, "Oh man, these guys are working, like working." So and like, we got better. Like, we moved the needle a little bit that day, and we continue to get better. And Dan was relentless. Like, my favorite Dan quote is not always my favorite Dan quote is, "We're out of money. Let's get back out on the road and sign somebody." So, like, I don't think that makes any sense, but whatever you say, Bob.
We'll have to have him come on and explain that one. Yeah.
Like that. He probably didn't even realize he said that stuff, but yeah. But no, he was good. Like, he was demanding, and it was good. It was really good for me to like kind of see the flip side of it. Because I mean, it's a tough conference. It's how you have to be to get a team, at the top of the podium. You gotta be relentless, and you gotta have a vision and a dream. So, and Dan absolutely had the vision and had, for what Alabama could be, and he's done an awesome job. So,
Were you still on staff, or if not, you certainly had a hand in this through building it up when they won the SEC championships?
no, and I had a tiny hand. I wouldn't say I had a hand in that
Is
at
that
all.
right?
I'll be honest with you. Like, it was, I think, 2 years I went, because it was at A&M indoors. Thing. Maybe I went to nationals after they won. Anyway, but it was Blaine did a really nice job, and I think DM might have still been there. There was a handful of my people, but like, Blaine was probably the bigger driving force from a sprint perspective,
Yeah.
behind that. So
Well,
I
I
think
remember.
the only part I would say I had a point in it is we got them off the ground so they could get good recruits in and be better than I was.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate your perspective of like not many of my kids, but you're right. It doesn't happen in 1 year. It takes a
yeah,
base to continue to grow. And I just remember seeing Dan at nationals, and I was like, hey, congratulations, man. Alabama doesn't win the SEC champion. I mean, they just don't. Look at
yeah,
the history of who wins the SEC championships, and Alabama has never done it. So that was a big deal. That may be as much as and the continued success he and his staff has had, and top fives and things like that
yeah.
at nationals. I still think maybe winning that SEC is the best job that
Yeah,
he's
I
done,
mean,
because that's hard.
yeah. I mean, I could have a whole conversation on the SEC championship being harder than NCAA sometimes. Like, and I
Oh,
know that doesn't make sense whatsoever, but I think there's just a culture, a team atmosphere. You got 30 guys there as opposed to maybe 15 guys there when you're trying to compete for, so you got your boys there a little bit. Like this, the environment is just different, which you can never understand until you're in it. But I mean, it was fun. And like that, and by the way, I didn't want to take away from, like, it wasn't just Blaine that, like, Pate was a huge part of winning those
oh
championships.
yeah.
Dan had some distance runners that were doing some things. I know Doug had some really good throwers. So
Mhm.
um, they were at a really good team during that time. And they still do. I mean,
Yeah.
like, what they got going on right now is really good.
It's
So
amazing. It's awesome. Yeah, that SEC meet. I was in it before Mizzou and Texas A&M. It got a lot worse when those guys came in. We just had
yeah,
Brett Halter on the podcast, and I was like, "Man, you guys came in." I was like, "That just made it worse." I go, and now
yeah,
your old boys, Oklahoma, are in there, and Texas, dude. I I don't think
yeah,
I was talking to a friend of mine at one of those two schools, so I won't name who it is. But I was like, dude, it's just no fun. It's like I would not have.
yeah.
Uh, no way, man, no way. So, uh, okay, so Alabama, and Where do we go?
Yeah.
You're becoming a little bit of a journeyman now here. So we're you know,
Yeah.
by the way, I'm pointing thumbs when I say that. That
Basically
was
what you,
my, yeah, that was my
yeah.
MO as well. What happens from Alabama? Where do we go?
Okay, so I just kept having people. I mean, that's a good problem, but I kept having people turn pro. And so I had an opportunity where I was able to kind of go out on my own a little bit with a little help from Adidas, and they were able to sponsor me a bit and have a group. And so I kind of relocated to the Austin area and had a pro group for a bit, and enjoyed that time too. It was really that was good from a coaching perspective, in that I was able to slow things down and do them probably the right way. Like I felt like I really developed my craft as a 100 coach and a hurdle coach, et cetera. Because I think it's easy to have this excuse, when I was in junior college, I'm coaching 50 people or whatever. And like, there's legitimacy to the, I just don't have the time to do the things I maybe know I need to do because I got 50 kids, right? I can't coach all 50 of them the way they need to be, but they all ran fast and they all got better and they all improved, but it was all, you had to coach in a way that it was a volume coaching situation. Whereas when I had the pro thing and I had about, on average about 8 people that I'm working with, it's my only job, but I don't have to do paperwork and I don't have to do all the other stuff. I could really dial in on video and I could really dial in on making sure that we approached the way we coached in a different way. Um, Ankle stability and hips and all the different things that I needed to take the time to do. And I've always been kind of my own strength coach. And so I was able to dive into that even more and kind of fine tune some of the stuff that I had already been doing, and get better with that. So I think I became a better coach during that time, from an X's and O's perspective. I don't know that I felt like my college coaching time has made me a better culture person and a better relationship person. I felt like that time as coaching the pros was really all about the individuals. So then it became more about the technical aspect of things and whatnot. So it was fun. It was great. It was educational. I mean, I went 6 continents and I don't even know how many countries, 50, 60, just for track and field. So I got to travel, help people have some success at the world level. And it was fun, eventually, like, I don't want to rush through that time because I had a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. But family reasons / I like had an itch for college. I'm an idiot, so I had an itch for college track and field. Like I had young kids at the time, and I was out of the country about 100 days out of the year, so that was always weighing in the back of my mind as they got older, and I started to miss softball and baseball and all those little things. And honestly, Bob just sort of reached out at the right time for me and kind of drew me back. Florida State was a place that, like, I mean, a lot of people see as like the job. So I have stumbled into being the director, head coach, or whatever at one of the best jobs theoretically in the NCAA for in a lot of people's spin. So even as a coach that was doing well financially, basically my own boss, and a lot of things that people aspire to, I would describe the Adidas job probably as my dream job. But if I was going to go back to college, it was like, this is now interesting for me because of Florida State, because of all of the other things that it has to offer, that I was always felt like this is a place where you can be good. This is a place where you can be successful. I'm not afraid of the SEC by any means, but I'm not an SEC. So you can have high levels of success and develop people at the same time. I think there's an important part of that element of having a track program. There's a million different things that'll make it sound like a Florida State sales pitch, but there's a lot of draw for me to Florida State at that time. Still is, obviously. So that's kind of, like I enjoyed the pro thing, but I'm always been kind of a college coach at heart. So that drove me back to Florida State and Bob and all the different things. So
there's a bit of a fallacy that as you go up in levels, and you get to define that however you want, that things get a little bit easier. Like I remember when I coached high school, I really wanted to coach college because my fallacy, my myth was, oh, coach college, I get to pick who I coach. In high school, I just take whoever comes to the team. College, I get to go out and pick. And then I realized, well, you don't always get the they don't always want you, right? And I remember when I went from Ball State to Mississippi State, so from the MAC to the SEC, I think most people would say, okay, that was a step up. And I remember thinking, oh man, it's going to be so much easier at Mississippi State. Like when I called people at Ball State, I had to explain where that was, who that was, those kind. When I call from Mississippi State, they're going to know we play on Saturdays. They're going to automatically know who Mississippi State is. And I've told the story several times. I remember my first recruit was the national 400 meter indoor record holder for high school, Elsie Coleman. And we started having a good rapport. And I was like, hey, so who all, besides us, who are you going to visit? And he was like, oh yeah, Florida, USC, I think Texas, and Baylor. And I was like, oh crap, I've got to beat Mouse. I've got to beat Los Angeles to Starkville. I got to beat 4x4 U, 400 meter U, Baylor. Like, oh, this didn't get easier. This got harder. I think maybe sometimes people think going from college to pro track coaching would be easier. You name some things that a lot of people would find attractive. Oh, instead of 50 kids or even 20 kids, you got 8. Oh, by the way, those 8 are pretty high level. They're not pro for no reason. They're already a pretty high level. You mentioned something that you and I talked about offline a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think I never coached pro, so I definitely have no experience here. You mentioned something that kind of I never realized, and you just kind of mentioned it there too, about the time away. Because I would think, I've always said the difference between middle school, high school, college, and pro track is the number of times you compete. Middle school, you compete 1 billion times, high school 100 times, college, much fewer. We don't have those Tuesday, Thursday meets, things like that. Pros, good Lord, we like to complain that the pros never compete, for crying out loud, so less meet. So I would think, oh, well, Matt, you were probably at the house a lot. You were, at the track, but you mentioned you were on the road a lot. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, okay, so basically there was times it was fantastic where I was, walking my kids to school in the morning and then going to track training and done with training and picking up my kids from school, and I'm home and I was watching a little bit of video, but I wasn't making recruit calls and I wasn't having to do all the other things that you're used to doing, right?
Yeah.
So there was times for 6 months where I was absolutely the best dad I've ever been, just around, a pretty decent husband. One day I'll get good at that.
Yeah, we'll ask her
like,
that. I'm not gonna take your word for that.
Let's not. Then, indoor would come around, and then, we had varying levels of pros. So some people needed to run indoors to kind of establish themselves. So then, okay, they may need a little help. So I go over with them for 2 or 3 weeks. And, if you think about a pro and that one person, they might only run 3 times, but I might be over there with 3 people and they may not be at the same places. So I might be in or 7 meets during that, 3 weeks span. So I'm bouncing from place to place or whatever, but I'm gone from the US for a while, and then I come back, and then we start doing the other things that we're doing. And then, the Diamond League has stretched itself from now it's freaking April to September, but at the time it was May to basically early September. And you have to be ready to run all the time. And I think, with that, one of the things that, say this for anybody that wants to be a pro coach, and anybody that, if there's an athlete listening that wants to be a professional athlete, you have to understand it's the NCAA championships on a Tuesday, followed by the NCAA championships on a Saturday, followed by the NCAA championships on a Wednesday the next week. You got to be able to run at your best against the best all the time. And just because it's April doesn't mean you can work your way through it. You don't get 7 races to get ready. You got to be ready all the time. And it's that level of the ability to run really well next to somebody else. That's what I mean by the NCAA final. So it's like you go run 994, you can run 994 in Jacksonville in April, and second place is 10:08. Cool. But can you run 994 when somebody else is running 979 and 4 other guys are running 994? Can you do that job? Can you do that, give that performance all the time? And so, as you said, it should get easier, but guess what? Everybody else is as good a coach as you are. Everybody else is as good an athlete as the people that you're working with, and sometimes better. And so, you would think it would get easier, and some parts of it did get easier, but really, the stakes are higher, the talent is higher, you have less margin for error. You got to be on point all the time. So, but just like in college football, moving up to professional football, hitting a 95-mile-an-hour fastball versus consistently hitting a 98-mile fastball that has completely different spin rate and angle of spin and all those different things. As you go to the pros, every single pitcher that you face for 162 games is good versus college game, you're playing 50 games and, you might see 5 ballers, so it's the same thing.
That's a great way you put it about how it's the NCAA final on Tuesday, and then you go on Saturday and do it again. And a completely different country. It's
Yeah.
China, and then it's
Yeah.
France, and then it's South America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you might have good travel, you might not. You might have the luxury of massage therapists, you might not. There's a lot of different things, and man, there's not a whole lot of middle class on the circuit. There's a lot of people that are really well taken care of, and there are people that are happy to be there. And they don't show you that in the scorecard when they line up. You know what I mean? So it's not a terrible life. It's a great life, but it's not the easiest life that you can imagine for sure. So it was for me. I was a coach. I just bounced from place to place. But from an athlete's perspective, it's hard, man.
One of my good friends, I've known him since he was 16, 17 years old, is Justin Gatlin. And I've really enjoyed his podcast, Ready, Set, Go. And one of the things that strikes me when they have a conversation about whether a kid should go pro or go to college, out of high school, or go to college, or should they stay in college, or what it's like coming out of college to go pro. One of the things that he repeats a lot, pardon me, I thought he would repeat a little bit of what you said about, like, hey man, every meet is a killer. Like, they are coming to get you, every meet, right? But he says that, but one of the things that they talk about a lot is with the travel, it's like, oh, and there's different foods. Like, I remember the first couple of times he said, I was like, oh, that's, it's funny. But then he kept saying it over and over for every example. And I was like, oh, I guess I never realized, you do get used to a certain type of food. And there is different foods, again, in China and Europe and things like that. So, and not to mention, obviously, the jet lag, time differences and things like that. So it is a little tougher. It looks from the outside very awesome and sweet. Like, oh man, you get to go to Shanghai and run and experience all this culture. And it's like, yeah, man, you're there to get a job done. And hopefully it doesn't take more than 9 point something seconds to get it done. And we know the difference between 9.7 and 10.7, by the way, is a snap.
Yep. So yeah, it's wild. That part of it is where, again, that middle class would come in handy. Like, if you're happy to be there, you might not be able to eat off off the reservation, as they say. Like, you might be just eating the free meal that they have for you, and you don't have a control over that food, and it's probably not. Whereas if you're making a little bit more, you're not afraid to wander down the street and find the thing. You got to go look for it sometimes. I mean, literally was having this conversation this morning with a girl that just wants to go pro. Like, this is part of the process that you have to get ready for. So
that's what struck me. I mean, Justin obviously very successful. So I'm like, oh, Jay, you could have whatever you want. It's like, oh man, he struggled. So gosh, if he's struggling,
yeah.
So. As much as you want, or maybe can get into this, as an assistant coach on a program, your pressure, not only internally, obviously, you want to do well, but you have pressure from your head coach. Hey, I need you to produce. Hey, I'm expecting this many points out of you at conference, nationals, whatever. When you're the head coach, again, you have your own internal pressures, but maybe you have pressures from your oversight and from your AD of like, hey, we're investing so much money into the program. We expect this performance at conference, nationals, et cetera. On the elite level, so you're working for Adidas. Where do I could imagine pressures coming from both sides, like an athlete looking at you like, hey man, you better get me straight and get me going here. And maybe from an Adidas, tell me where the pressures come from, as much as you can or want to discuss that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'll be honest with you. My internal pressure was probably greater than any pressure I felt from anywhere else. I mean, I have zero bad things to say about the people that were supporting me at Adidas. I mean, they were fantastic and good people, and gave me opportunities, and continue to, like, I mean, they signed Trey, you know what I mean? Like, and have left him right where he's at. And I've always had good relationship with those guys. I think they do a phenomenal job. And, but they also, I think they also knew, I understand the expectation. If you're getting medals in the sport, or you're not doing your job. Like, that's how we're judged, right? Like, you break a record, win a medal. If you're not continually winning medals, or like make it look like you're going to win a medal, then they have to move on to the next guy. You know what I mean? Like, you can get fourth and they're comfortable. You can get sixth and they're comfortable with where you're at, as long as they're not paying you world record money. Like, if you got a guy that they think is there and he's performing at that level, they're pretty happy with where they're at. They would obviously like you see them coach, and as an athlete, we'd like to see you get this medal, and they like to reward all that kind of stuff. But that's how we're judged. Like, if you've got medals, life's a little easier on that circuit. When you don't have medals, it's a little harder for your agent. It's a little harder for you. It's a little harder for your coach. It's just the truth of the business. But you're right. It comes from both sides, and then, like I said, if I put my pressure on myself, then no amount of pressure that an athlete puts on me is going to be too much. But I told you from the beginning, like when I got into this whole thing, like I never wanted to be the weak link. So that's kind of been with me the entire time. So I've been fired before by an athlete, you know, so like they felt like I was the weak link and they needed to go do something different. And that's absolutely acceptable because they have one chance at this thing, you know what I mean? So like it's totally fine that they had to go find something that they felt like was going to be a better fit. You know, and that's just part of the business. It's what you got to do because like they are their own business. So they have to be able to make sure they manage it at the level that they need to manage it at and find someone that they feel like can take them where they want to go. So yeah.
Knowing there's a lot of factors that play into this, but do you know, I believe consistency is key, meaning, you know, if you get a kid for 4 years under you and you've built up, you know, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and they have the ability to go pro, I think year 5, 6, 7, 8 is vitally important that you're stacking the things that coach is doing. Again, knowing there's a lot of factors around, do you think should a kid these are 22-year-old people now, so should have these people really consider staying with the coach that quote unquote got them there, or is it best to go find a professional? I shouldn't even done air quotes there because I mean there are professional coaches. What do you generally think? Again, knowing there's a lot of factors that play into it.
Probably a unique perspective because I've been on both sides of it. You know what I mean? Like I can see both. So I'm probably going to give you a middle of the road answer. It's a kind of a case by case situation. I think that there, as a business decision, you could see where a Nike or an Adidas or a New Balance or whoever it is has invested money in an athlete, and so they need a known commodity to make sure that that athlete performs at the level. Somebody that they can also have an interest in, communication wise and otherwise, to be able to have a conversation about what is this kid doing, what is this man doing, what is this woman doing, that are they going to be where we need to be, are we holding them accountable, can I hold you accountable to make sure you're holding them accountable? So I understand that business model and why it works. It's a trusted commodity, you roll with it, etc. The flip side of that is, and again, this is probably where I would lean the other direction, is like relationships and coaching are huge, like absolutely huge. And like if we talk about the psychology being 80% of it and the physicality being 20% of it a lot of the time, why would we switch the coach? Because you know that there's some psychology, that coach knows that athlete better generally than most people do because you spend so much time together. You know the buttons to press and not to press. So there's certainly an argument to say, hey man, if it isn't broke, you know, don't fix it. I think that a lot of times certain companies are willing to kind of leave it there until it's not working at the level that they need to have it work at, and then they need to have that conversation. So I think each shoe company kind of has a different philosophy. I don't want to go into the details of each of those, so it sounds, you know, negative towards any company. But at the same time, you know, I understand the why for most of them, and I think it's case by case. Truly, I feel like if the athlete feels strongly enough about it, it's their job, it's their career. They should have a say in what they're doing, not the coach, not the agent, not the athlete. But they have to, you know, when you're a 20-year-old kid or a 22-year-old kid that's being offered money, you make one misstep and all of a sudden you make a lot less. And so it can be difficult to navigate those waters. I wouldn't want to write a playbook today because I would probably screw somebody up. So don't follow my playbook. But definitely, I wish there was a little bit more maneuverability within that. So,
do kids, when they have the lead in choosing a pro level coach, you know, outside of college, and maybe it's not initially outside of college because maybe it's more getting assigned at that point, but do they actually like interview a coach and talk about like and ask, and maybe they have no clue, you know, not every kid's coming out of school with a biomechanics degree and things like that. They just, you know, you're an athlete. We've talked about this, where being an athlete is a very selfish pursuit. That's not a negative, meaning everything coach tells me, I'm trying to figure out how does that work for me to make me faster or jump farther or whatever. That's a selfish thing, which that's what you got to be an athlete, certainly to be an elite athlete. Are they, do they interview coaches and ask the questions like, well, how do you, let's use that 100-meter example, how do you train sprinters? You know, are you a run 400 meters till you die during the fall, or are you a speed? But, you know, there's a lot of different ways
Right.
of doing this, and there's been successes in a lot of different ways as well. But do they get to that minutia, or are they more, hey, so can I, like, is Matt cool? Like, can I work with Matt? Like,
Yeah. It's a combination of those things, man. Like I've had interviews where I was like, no, this is not gonna, personality wise, I could tell this is a no for me or whatever. I've had interviews with people where it was, hey man, how come you're not asking me this question? And I'll just ask them, how come you haven't asked me this question? Is this not important to you? I think from watching you from a distance, this should be the question that you're asking. Then you see where that goes. But yeah, that happens. They're either set up by a shoe company or set up by an agent, or like I can't get into the details of. I mean, I don't know all the details of every single situation, but usually there's you get in front of one or two people, they find someone that they want to go. Like I've had people reach out to me that were in college that like Josh Zeller was at Michigan. I'm good friends with Steven. He was looking for a different environment, different weather, different training climate, and wanted to train with Trey or whatever. So I don't know who else he reached out to, but he reached out to me. We had a conversation. We clicked. It was good. He moved down here. Rest is history. So that is generally how that happens. Then you have to have, okay, who's their agent? You have to work that deal out and figure out if they're with a shoe company or not. And, all of that kind of stuff happens. But yeah, that's kind of the ins and out of it. I think if you can figure, this is like recruiting. If you can figure out what you are missing, or if you can work with this person, or the personality works well, then I think you put yourself in a situation to have a better chance of success. And that's about all you can do in the game. So
yeah, it seems like it really struck me when you talked about I keep saying the kid. We're so old, Matt.
yeah, I know.
That the kid is their own business. One step
Yep.
away, you go from making a lot of money to making a lot less of that money. So you should be very invested in all of the aspects: where you're training, who you're training with, the coach that you're with, the support staff and team that you surround yourself with. And I know I've heard it from the other side where elite level, pro level coaches are like, yeah, who we bring into the stable is important too, because one bad apple can spoil it all. And so it just struck me like, oh man, there is so much more that goes into this than I really thought of. I know on the college though, I've been there and I've recruited, and that seems, I don't know, a degree or two less, because like I need every one of those 18 to 22-year-olds. Like, and if one doesn't pan out, well, that sucks. I hope I didn't invest too much money, but we can still be a good team. I don't know. It just seems extra. Did you ever consider becoming an agent?
I don't know that I'm built for that necessarily. I think they're, probably naively like every 23-year-old coach, I had all the answers and think I could do this or that or whatever. I don't want to say I could never do the job better. I think that I could provide some value in some form of being an agent. I don't know if I'm a great negotiator, but I definitely think that from an athlete perspective, maintaining an athlete's needs out there, some things I think I could do a really, really good job with. Like it's something that Trey and I joked about before he ever had an agent a long time ago. Like him wanting to be one potentially down the line. I think that in some ways could probably do a pretty good job. But again, until you get into it, you never really know. Like I've been pretty fortunate. Like I don't know how many agents I know, probably 80. I don't know. But and I've been around some pretty darn good ones that have been able to treat their clients well, and things like that. So
I'm surprised there hasn't been, that I know of, a hybrid client coach. You get both ends. I don't know. It feels like, I don't know. Maybe that's a conflict of interest. I don't know, but it just seems like, I don't know.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It'd be interesting.
Last question before we get back here to Florida State. I told you about myths and myth busting. One of the things that I fight and argue against a lot, there's coaches, and it's getting worse lately as we talk about Power Four and the 45 scholarships and the super conferences and all this thing. There's this myth that coaches don't want to develop anymore, and typically the definition of developing, in that an example of what they're talking about, is they don't want to take a guy like you, the head coach of Florida State. You don't want to take a 1090 guy and make them a 10-2 guy. That seems like developing, and I think anybody would say, wow, man, that's really good. And so the argument is like, oh, you don't want to develop, you just want that 10-2 kid off the portal internationally, right out of high school, and ready to plug and play and automatically do good. And my argument always back, and I've had some experience with this of working with some 10 flat kids and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, if you take in that example I gave, if you take a 10-2 kid, which that's fast, especially at a high school or whatnot, and you make them a 10 flat kid, so on paper only a 0.2 difference, where in that other example it was 0.7. It's like that's developing. And by the way, that's really hard to take a 10-2 kid to a 10 flat kid is hard, just like 10-9 to 10-2 is hard. So there's no easy in this. What do you on when you're an elite coach, and even through a lot of some of your stops up to today, you've gotten elite kids, like really good kids. You've gotten kids that already ran sub 10, and your job was to make them now to run 9.9 or 9.8, and there's a lot of steps in between those 9.9 and 9.8s, obviously. Talk to us about developing, and maybe you're going to agree with these other guys where it's like, oh yeah, man, if I'm not taking an 11.5 to 10.2, what am I really doing here? Talk to us about developing elite athletes. What does developing elite athletes look like?
Okay, so this is first of all, fantastic question. There's about 17 different levels of this answer that I'll probably give you, but I think that with anything in life, if you go all in on one decision, there's not going to be substance behind what you do. So if you're only developing, you're going to run into trouble because they may not develop fast enough, right? And then you get yourself in trouble because your team's not quite good enough yet. If you only go in the portal, your culture will struggle. That's the truth. Like if you're only in the portal, you're bringing people in, they're a short timer. I find value in a person, and I know it's maybe I'm old, where you come into a place because you really felt passionate about going to Troy, or you felt passionate about going to Florida State, or you felt passionate about going to the University of Oklahoma. Like you really wanted to go there. They had a coach that you vibed with or whatever, but that more importantly was a place that you wanted to go to school, and they had a good track team, and you wanted to be part of that track team because you had a championship mindset and you wanted to be part of that. And so when I look at developmental people, tying all of that together, I look at developmental people that I have to see something on video that I can work with, right? But then that gets you into the door for me to have a conversation with you. And in the conversation with you and your family and everybody else, I have to figure out if I'm going to take a risk on you from a developmental perspective, I need to make sure that the mind is where it needs to be. And what I mean by that is you can be a 12 flat girl and have a championship mindset. And you can be an 11-1 girl and not have a championship mindset. Like you can have a certain level of talent, but you don't have what's between the ears to get you where you need to go. And for me, we are never going to be on the same page if you're not willing to have that mindset of dedication, taking the distractions out of your life, doing all the different things that are necessary for you to be good. That's the championship mindset of that, wanting to be good, wanting to be positive, wanting to be in the right environment. So I'm willing to take a risk on that developmental person, quote unquote, if they have the mindset to go with it. You can't just sign every 11-8 girl that comes along and expect her to become an 11-2 girl, because if she's not willing to work, if she's not willing to buy in, if she's not dedicated, there's a million, she may just not have the talent to do it either. But you got to find some things that are going to set yourself up for success. I'll give you a perfect example because it can lead us down a variety of different paths. Deja DeFran is the school record holder at Florida State in the 100-meter dash. She ran 10.94 into a 0.1. Okay. She ran 11.69 in high school. And in 2 years, she ran 10.94. She also ran 10.88 with a 2.2. Right. She was a 23.78 or 80 or something like that. 23.8, 200 girl one time. And she ran 22.34 in 2 years. That's development. Right. But it's a combination of development and what you talked about, development and development. So in year one, she had a huge leap to 11 flat from 11.6, and she had a huge leap to 22, I think 6 from 23.8, whatever. And then the next year she made that second leap, which is now she's running 10.9. She's able to do that next to people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but when I saw her, she did something special for 2 steps. That was it. And I was at a meet, and I saw her, and there was a ton of other coaches, and I did my damnedest to make sure nobody knew who she was and nobody knew that I was there to see her. Because I was like, I like that. And I talked to her dad, and I talked to her dad. The dad had a championship mindset. And, so we went down that path where I started recruiting a girl from Lincoln, Nebraska to Florida State. because she had that something, and so you got to find the right person for the right fit and all that kind of stuff. So, you just figure out the situation that's going to work for you. And so I'm a developmental coach. That's why I came back to college, to be honest with you. I've always felt like I was a developmental coach. I think part of that is I was a walk-on athlete, you know what I mean? And so part of that is also how I motivate kids, also how I kind of have been able to get kids to buy in, is that my only true talent is evaluation of talent. I'm a pretty good coach, but I can see things that other people can't see. And so I can put myself in a situation to make myself look like probably a better coach than I actually am. So I can see what I can fix. I can see what I can get out of them. I try and make sure I get the right person so that when we work together, I'm set for success. So
I think some of the issue comes up from, so you gave a great example there of the young lady who ran 11:69. Let's just call it 11:70, right? Because you're probably not really your PR, unless you ran 11:69.
She definitely ran a lot more 11:8 than she ran 11:7 even. Yeah.
So I think the issue comes up is people see that example and say, "Hey, Matt, look what you did with this 11:7, 11:8 girl.
Yeah, now take that other one. Yeah.
Here, I got another one. And by the way, I think this one's better. She's stronger in the weight room, or, she also runs the quarter or whatever." Yeah. How do you answer that? And it may be the part of that evaluation, not everybody's going to have those two steps in that example, those kind of things.
Yeah, that's the hard part, because then it borderlines when you're talking to a coach, or you're talking to a dad or a mom or whatever, where you don't want to insult anybody, and you don't want to say, but it definitely, there's 11:8 and there's 11:8. And so there's 11:8 and built right. There's 11:8 and hits the ground right. And so I sort of try to gently explain what I'm looking for and how they hit the ground and how they don't hit the ground. For the best way I try to describe it, so that I put the onus on me and not on them not being good enough in my eyes, is that I know what I'm good at fixing, and I'm not good at fixing the thing that I need to fix with that athlete. And so I'm not telling you she's not going to run fast. I'm just saying I might not be the guy to get her to run fast. I may not be the guy to get him to run fast, because I've never had success fixing that problem. That makes sense. So I'm more than willing to put it on me. Like, hey, man, I can't. That's not what I do. Right. And so whereas with that other girl, she fit what I did, and she actually was able, I knew I could fix the things that she didn't do well. And when I brought her in, she was able to adapt to that. And then you can, go into the mindset of all that other stuff with it too. But,
Yeah, and here's my concern when people say, these kids, these 11:8 kids, they're not getting the opportunities to work with, the Matt Kanes and Mouse Holloways and Carol Smith Gilberts, because they never say they don't have the time to do it. Meaning, they got to get good fast. You only have 4 or 5 years. That's not a lot of time, right? And today, at least, and maybe we'll get into this, there's so few scholarships. It's like, man, when you miss on a scholarship, boy, it's toast, man. But my concern is, my argument is always like, hey, that kid might not be able to go to Florida State or Miami or whatever school they want to go, or Troy. I forget about the number one school sometimes. Right off the bat, but there are other great options, and I'm not saying like, oh, there's other great secondary options. What I mean is, go look at what do we call it, the G5 level. Go look at D2. Go look at D3. There are a lot of go look at nationals. It's fast. These kids are stinking fast on any level, right? And here's what I don't like is this circle is they'll say at the same time, well, all those schools are getting poached. Like Florida State's stealing the best Troy University kid, Southeast Louisiana kid, Sam Houston, and it's like, okay, well, they're poaching them. Maybe, I don't like that word poach, by the way, but those kids are transferring, but they're transferring because they're now fast enough to fit in that program, maybe. But how'd they get that fast? They got there because of the great coaches at Sam Houston, Southeast Louisiana, Troy, the examples that I gave there. So it's like, so they're getting developed. Like, I don't understand how there's not room for development when they are getting developed. I just don't like this double speak that's happening right now, and it's blaming. That's what it really is. It's blaming every side. And I just think that's so unfair to everybody involved, the high school kid, the high school coaches, the G5 coaches, the power fours, whatever. It's just it's a weird, like, attacking mechanism that we have when it's like, man, the kids that are at the end of the day, and you alluded to this, they have to have the God-given talent to run that. No matter how great of a coach you are or how much of your championship mentality that you have as an athlete, if God didn't give you the ability for that young lady to run sub 11, it wasn't happening. So you got to have that first and foremost. And it feels like when you look at the depth chart of each of our events, the people who have the God-given talent to run the really fast times are getting there. Certainly there's some people that aren't making it because of a lot of other different factors, but it feels like we're hitting at a pretty high batting average, baseball dad. So it feels like the system's working.
Yeah, like there's so many layers to that, man. Like I think that for me personally, as a junior college coach, as a Division II athlete, as a developmental coach, as whatever, obviously, I think again it goes back to, like, sometimes the relationship is the most important part of the coaching. It can outweigh the X's and O's. Sometimes the relationship is maybe not strong enough to keep you from going to the other bigger, shinier school that you want to go to, because in your DNA, that's something you've always sought after, right? That's totally fine. Like, anybody that goes into the portal, for me, like if they're in our program and they decide they want to go in the portal, like, I'm totally fine with that, because it feels like they need something that they don't feel like we're providing, and that's their perspective. It's their life. It's what they want to do. I had a young man come in my office yesterday and say, "Hey, man," he was very uncomfortable. Like, "Coach, I appreciate your. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to go into the portal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you're graduating in May, or excuse me, in December, right?" He said, "Yeah, I want to apply to different law schools." Okay, like, yeah, man, like, that's not an uncomfortable situation for me. I'm fully in support of that. And if you're not planning on going to law school at Florida State, well, what do you want to do? And then that sparked a whole conversation on, he wants to do contract law and he potentially wants to be an agent. I was like, well, it turns out this is a good time to have a conversation. But he was a very professional kid, and, like, I'm wholeheartedly in support of whatever he needs to do, even if he was a guy that was a sophomore that was trying to go to another school in our conference. Like, if that's where he feels like he needs to be, fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's okay to break up with your girlfriend. Like, it's fine to break up with your girlfriend.
That's the kind of story we need to hear more of, Matt. And what I mean by that is, all we hear about, this, I don't understand the hatred of the transfer portal. And what I say that is, kids were allowed to transfer before the transfer portal. This is not a new thing.
Yeah.
I don't understand, like, why the transfer portal is the evil thing. But you hear the story of, well, these kids don't have to be held accountable anymore. They can just jump ship. As soon as Matt yells at them, they can just go. And certainly there are some kids like that. By the way, those kids still existed back in 1990 and 2000, et cetera, before portal. But also kids like that example you just gave there, that sat down in front of you and said, "Hey, coach, thank you. I'm like, they let you know in advance instead of you just finding out because you looked at the portal the next day or whatever." Like, those things are happening. We like to demonize this whole thing, like every kid is just able to just jump. And by the way, we think that every kid is transferring. It's like, man, they're not. Not every kid. I look at rosters. I talk to coaches every day. Certainly a certain segment are transferring, and maybe it's more now because it's in the culture a lot more, but it's not this new epidemic, in my opinion. I don't know. I sit from the outside, so I know I miss a lot of things.
Yeah, like, there's a lot of people in the portal, man. Like, it's wild. I think it's like, it was always happening before, but it was always like a secret, right? Like, you didn't know. You're like, wait, she's looking, because some of the people we've had on our team, I mean, I've signed out of the portal. Tyra Wilson was at the University of Texas. Alexandra Webster was at Oregon. I cold called those girls. They had no interest in coming to Florida State at the time. Like, had that been the old days, they would have gone somewhere else because they had in their idea of where they were going. They would have contacted those 2 or 3 schools. That's where they'd have gone. Right.
See, that's another myth right there, Matt. I hear that every kid that's in the transfer portal already knows where they're going. So to me, again, I don't actually. I don't like this, because that also indicates that coaches have already talked to them, which I refuse to believe that is happening every time.
I hope not, and I don't want to get into that, but
no,
there's probably some layer of that. There probably was some layer of that 10 years ago. So
there was before. That's what I'm talking. I don't think it's more because of the transfer portal.
I think it's the same. I think, but I think where it opens it up more, and I don't mind the portal as much, so I can't be a hypocrite about it, is that like I said, I got those girls were at good programs. I was able to get them to come and they got a lot better. I mean, Tyra Wilson ran 55 seconds last year and she was running 61 seconds before. And Alexandra Webster ran 1270 and she was 13.0, 13.3 pretty consistently. You know what I mean? I don't think that either one of them thought about coming to Florida State before they had a conversation with me. You know what I mean? And so sometimes having that portal has opened it up where you can find the right person, the right fit, the right coach, the right program for you that was going to either have the patience or be demanding enough or whatever it is that they were missing. Great coaches at Texas, great coaches at Oregon, great programs, great facilities, great everything.
Right.
But sometimes you got to find the fit that's right for you. And,
right.
You know, so there is where a portal is a good thing. So I can't say the portal is a good thing and then turn around and say it's a bad thing and you shouldn't go there. I think where a lot of coaches get themselves in trouble is it's only a bad thing when it negatively affects them. Right. You know, so but it's a great thing when I can go, poach somebody off of another team.
Well, I think the biggest negative that happened was we gave it a name. It used to just be kids transfer. Now it's the portal. So now we have this entity to blame.
I think, trust me, I'm as bad as anyone. The grad school portal opened yesterday. On that thing, and that thing was on fire yesterday. There was the names on it. So, it is the nature of the business.
It was interesting to me the way you said it earlier, that it's okay to break up with your girlfriend. And when you said that, I started thinking, it's like, oh, I was in love with my high school sweetheart, and she's a great person. Thank God I did not marry her. Thank God I found my wife. And and I think when you said it like that, because I think a lot of us could think about past relationships of the ones we thought were the one or whatnot, and they were not the one, and we found the one later on. When you think about that in the school setting, it's like, oh, because recruiting to me is a little bit unfair. The song and dance that we do with recruiting, when we bring them on and we, the steak dinners and all this stuff. And it's like, I'm just letting you know, this ain't real life. We ain't eating steak and lobster every night. Maybe at Florida State, you guys eat steak and lobster I don't know. But then you get on campus and it's like, okay, well now real world, you got to go to classes. You'll be, expect to be at practice at X, Y, and Z. You slip up, I'm going to, hold you accountable, things like that. You're not holding anybody accountable during a recruiting visit, but when real world comes in, so you learn a lot more, and you probably aren't talking a lot about training necessarily during recruiting. So then you get in there, and to your point, you get there and it's like, oh man, this style's not working for me. That's not how I'm supposed to become a better sprinter, jumper, thrower, or whatever. Well, break up with your girlfriend and go find the one that is supposed to be, and hopefully it works out. And by the way, it doesn't always work out. The next girlfriend is not always the right one, or you did leave the one you're supposed to be with. But yeah, and I also get it. And I also get it, sitting in your seat too, there's pressures for you, head coach and assistant coaches, to perform. And when the kid that was really good for you leaves, it's like, well, I was going to get an attaboy this year because of how well this person was going to do. And now they're gone. That sucks. I got to go do it again. So.
Well, I think there's two layers of that too. Is like, you can look at it like, man, I just lost 20 points at the conference meet, or I lost the guy that like was the heart and soul of what we do. You know what I mean? Like, not just the points, but like he's the guy that was like really held it together. And sometimes you can see that, don't realize until it's gone. But there's different layers of that when you lose somebody. That it does hurt when your girlfriend leaves you. It does hurt when that happens or whatever. But like, I think when the kids are looking to go to another spot, I think the biggest thing that I wish that I could tell all of them, whether they're looking at me or they're looking at somewhere else, is like, man, you got to be honest with yourself about what you really need the second go round, because you don't want to have to do this a third time. Because it's, I mean, from an academic perspective and everything else, like you can't really transfer that much. So it's not a good thing.
Right.
So you really honest with yourself about what you're looking for, and I find that is not always the case when somebody, they tell you they want something, then they end up going somewhere and you're like, yeah, that is exactly the opposite of what you told me you wanted, but best of luck, and it's all about, being true to yourself and finding out exactly what you're trying to get to happen.
I painted a very anti on the recruiting spiel there. I just went on the coaching side, like, oh, you're not really being yourself, you use steaks and dinners. By the way, the opposite side is true too. When you're the recruitee, when you're the being recruited, you're not 100% truthful either in what you're telling
Yeah.
coach. It's the same song and dance we deal with in the private sector of interviewing candidates as well. That candidate is always like, well, what does Mike actually want? So let me act like that. When in reality, I really just want you to be yourself. And if I don't think you're the right fit for the job, I don't want to hire you. And by the way, that's a good thing for you, because if you can't be yourself, when you get on base here, when you get on in, we call it campus here, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. Mike doesn't like me because you're now showing your true colors, and it's like, we could have done this back in the recruiting boss and you'd be much happier, and I would too. So it's both sides. It's recruiters and recruiting. That I wish there was a way to take it down to a level and be real with each other. I think there'd be less transferring. I really do.
I do too. I think if we I hate to say this out loud. I think if we could do less on the visits, if we could do less glitz and glamour, if there was different things. I mean, I don't know what you cut back, but like if we could only do certain things on visits, I think the kids would maybe make a little bit different decisions about what they want to do.
Yeah.
But we're in the recruiting arms race essentially. So
it's a good point
with football and basketball and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think we're ever going to go back the other direction. But I have found, and whatever, I do better with the women, particularly. Like I've gotten away from the football weekends. That was such a big deal for us at Alabama for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can't say that out loud, but I had no better experience for me watching a football game than there. Florida State's amazing and it's unique, and Osceola and Renegade and the whole thing. But as a football fan watching those games, and I was spoiled, we won 3 out of 4 national championships when I was there, so there was that. But that enjoyment of being able to do that. But I've gotten away from that, like kind of on the women's side, and got less for the party and more bringing people on a Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because they get to see what everyday life looks like. And if you talk to somebody on the phone or on a Zoom call or whatever in a home visit, and you drop that nugget of like, hey, would you want to come on a regular time, or do you want to come for the show? And then you learn who they are, and then you learn who mom and dad are too. Sometimes mom and dad are like, we are coming for the show. Like dad's always wanted to watch a Bama football game or a Florida State football game.
Sure.
And that's an underlying reason why they may be coming for the visit. And then you realize, oh, well, maybe I need to be working mom more, or maybe I need to establish a relationship with the kid. Whatever. You learn about everybody. They reveal themselves slowly through every recruiting conversation.
Yeah.
So, but I've had more success signing people that are on the women's side, at least, not coming on the glitz and glamour weekends. They've been coming on the meat and potatoes weekend, so to speak. And I think we reveal ourselves better there too, because there's more time for the kids to kind of spend a little bit of time with them, with the team, if that makes any sense, because there's less moving parts, so to speak.
That's
so, and again, everybody's going to find their own thing that works for them in recruiting too.
Yeah, I always wondered, like, how many kids are, taking visits to Hawaii or to University of Oregon or USC, UCLA just to be at LA. Like, how many are just like, oh man, I've never been to LA. I just want to go and check out what LA is. So I'm not really interested in going that far. Maybe they're from Florida, but it's like, well, they're going to pay it for it too, by the way. So I'll do it. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Yeah. Not many people had that same attitude to come to Starkville. Just putting that out there. Not many people are like, I just want the glitz and glamour of Stark Vegas.
To that point, man, that this all kind of does tie together. That first year at Bama, with that whole group, we all were pretty good coaches and we were working our butts off or whatever. But I think we brought 14 official visitors on one weekend. The LSU, Alabama, I think it was like 6-3 or 9-6 or whatever. It was like one of the greatest games I've ever been to. Like LeBron, everybody, all this stuff was going on or whatever. There was 100,000 people that didn't go into the game. Like the environment was unlike anything. I heard that this past weekend was similar or whatever. We signed one kid out of that group. Like everybody wanted to come. They were coming for the football game, man. They were coming for the environment. They were coming for the fun. And we had superstars. I mean, I don't want to name names, but there was probably 3 Olympians on that visit. But they were coming for that. They were coming for the visit, not to look at our school at that time.
Yeah, so, it's tough. I don't want to get in. I want to move on, but I do kind of push back when people talk about, Oregon has it so easy, Texas has it so easy, Florida State has it so easy. Everybody wants to go to Alabama football game, but it's like, bro, there are so many. Every one of those every program has things that they have to get over on, like that are tough, whether it's admission standards, whether it's
Yeah.
oh, the kids only want to be here for the Alabama LSU game. They're not really coming to recruit. They're coming to, it's a free weekend vacation, and
Yeah.
they're already thinking about it. Every school, every single one. You go look at the top 10 at NCAA's this year and think that, oh man, they're the rich, they keep getting richer. Each one of those has something tough to get over.
Yeah.
It really is. It's not just simple just because you're an LSU, an FSU, whatever, or Texas. It's not easy just because it's that. There are, by the way, those are all recruiting against each other. So you're already trying to beat the other good guys and gals that are coaches out there. So,
and I've run into people on the circuit, and they were like, "Coach, that was my favorite visit I ever took."
that didn't
Or
sign
like,
with you.
what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, so I came back to what I did, and I still wasn't good enough. So
I loved everything, but I ain't
it
go
was,
there.
it was like a glimpse into being married. Basically, it's like I'm doing my best here. I'm trying.
Well,
So
let's
yeah,
move forward to Florida State. You already mentioned, a lot of the things that drew you to Florida State, both personally and professionally, and you spent quite a few years there, quite a few fun years as an assistant coach with a lot
yeah,
of good people. I knew a lot of the assistant coaches that have been through the program here in the last, 5-10 years there. Great people, great coaches, and now you find yourself in the big boy chair. You're in the head coaching seat there, and things have so a lot of things change when you go from this, when the assistant becomes head, when that title changes. A lot of things change there, but things have changed a lot in the NCAA as well. We won't get into specifics, but specifically in the ACC, and obviously,
yeah,
recently there was an article about a meeting that the Ohio State AD had with the Ohio State Board of Trustees, and one of the first things he said is everything changes every 30 minutes. So like, like almost like by the time I finish my talk with you, Board of Trustees, I could walk out of this room and it'll be
yeah,
different. And it really struck
yeah.
me because I'm like, man, the Ohio State AD is saying that. A lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of things run through Ohio State. So, how are you staying adjustable, being adaptable to the changes that are happening, things that are, I'm gonna say, might be happening? We think things are happening, but they might not. We don't really have a lot of clarity. How are you staying adjustable? Oh, and by the way, at the same time, still trying to do what you really enjoy, being on the track, coaching young people.
Man, that's a lot of layers to that too. I like your questions because they made me think. It's like as you're asking the question, like, what does my day to day look like? And so I certainly inherited a program that has a lot of history at a very odd time in not just the NCAA, but track and field, right? Like roster changes, right? Like 17 and 45, that's supposedly happening. Does that mean scholarships? Does that mean we're getting scholarships? Not scholarships. Every school's different. Nobody knows what we're doing. There's a lot of like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Trying to, get that information, share it with your administrators, get their administrators are talking to administrators probably and getting ideas, I would assume, about where that's going to go. And, so we're just, like you said, new information coming down at all times. Specific to Florida State, I have a great job. Like it is challenging every single day. I was excited for the challenge of becoming a head coach again because of the things like I feel like I have the energy to push us back to where we need to be. If that makes any sense, like it's a relentless challenge every single day of trying to get people on board to do things internally differently than maybe we did it for the last 20 years. And so, Bob laid a great foundation of success here, and he did things the way he wanted to do them, and he had a lot of support here. And any adjustment to that, whether I need more from somebody or less from somebody, is new because everybody had worked with him for 5, 10, 20 years, however many years they've been here, because he'd been here just about longer than anybody else. So there's unique challenges in that. There's unique challenges in the expectation of what I want from our program, where I want our program to go, how I want us to get back to winning national championships and competing for national championships on men's and women's side and all that kind of stuff. So it's been, a unique time to do all of this all at once. It's fun. It's challenging. When I got to Florida State, we had there was good people here. So kind of backtracking on that, like Dorian Scott was here as the throws coach. Keith Hurston was the jumps coach. He's now at Texas Tech. Kelly was our women's distance coach. She did a really nice job. And then Bob myself. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody else. And then, then COVID happened, and there was some evolution within our program because for a variety of different reasons. And, Dorian took a job. Kelly got out of coaching. Keith took a job. I was actually interviewing for another job, and it was like, I'm going to stay, I'm going to stick this out, whatever. And so then our staff evolved again. Oh yeah, I forgot. My God, I forgot Rick, the guy who I kept on staff from before. Phenomenal coach, does a great job with the men. And so, that evolved. Then the staff kind of changed. Doug Reynolds came back with me, or come back from being a head coach to come back into assistant coaching, because I think he was looking for something a little bit different there as well. And then life happens there too. Kansas job opens. That was one of the first jobs he ever had. That's where he met his wife. He goes over there. All these different things keep happening. Our staff keeps evolving and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of led us to kind of where we are now with me taking over and bringing in the staff that I have here now. And no, it's good. It's exciting time, with all that.
Well, you segued me perfectly into my last question as we wrap up here today, Matt. As you stare down the 2025, you're in the middle of the 2024 cross country season. I have to publicly say to you, man, I'm so proud. You've always been this guy, and honestly, I think this might be, I don't know if you would say this or not from the outside, at least, maybe this is a little bit of the Martin Smith influence, meaning, I think of Martin Smith as a very holistic track team guy. He didn't want just distance runners. He wanted sprinters, jumpers, throwers, hurdlers, etc. So you've always been a little bit of you're the sprint hurdles guy, but you always like, hey man, our cross country team did good. Great job. Now as the head coach, I see you doing that even more, which I think it's even more important now in the role that you're at today. But as you are in 2024 cross country season, as you're staring into 2025 indoor and outdoor season, what's got you excited? Whether it's kids, the coaching staff. I mean, you put together your first full coaching staff here. The schedule. Do you have a certain meet circle? What's got you excited, man, as you stare into the future here?
Well, I'm excited about my staff. I'm excited about the people that I was able to assemble here. I think they bring unique things to the table. Some that I retained from the previous staff, and some people I brought in. Some people that we all have some sort of interconnectedness in some fashion. But I think in passing we were talking before. They all bring something different to the table outside of coaching. Something unique, some value as I see it. In different ways. Tim Cawley was a head coach for 10 years, right? I know you know him really well. And like he brings a different perspective for me as a first-time Division I head coach. He's got 10 years head coaching experience. He was very interested in going back to being an event coach. So, he brings some ability to kind of keep me like on the right path, if that makes any sense. Tony Davis is going to come in and help me in the women's sprints. He was at New Mexico State. He was one of my athletes at Barton. He was on the team with those guys. And was like, he was that guy that maybe didn't run that fast, but everybody loved Tony. That makes any sense? So the value that he provides as a team guy is phenomenal. He's made his way in coaching on his own. He broke a couple of my national records at Barton when he was there. So I love that. He's a Barton guy, and that's at my heart. So, him, Luke Bryant, not Luke Bryan, the Country Western Center. Luke Bryant was a guy that does a lot of different things. He was an athlete at Oklahoma when I was there. So that's I got to know him, and then he was at Texas State. He was at the University of Texas. So he was a fundraising guy in addition to being a coach. And so in the NIL world, we got to have different ideas and different ways of things and different connections. And he's a relentless recruiter and great dude. He does a nice job. I kept Rick because I've always valued what Rick's done, like from a distance from the other side of the track, if that makes any sense. I think he's a great man. The kids respond really, really well to him. And, we're kind of co-oping, working together in the sprints now a little bit more so that we're kind of streamlined with the way that we're doing things, which is a unique thing. And I think he's taken on that new challenge and he's doing a great job with it. And Cody's done a really, really nice job of kind of rebuilding our women's program. Like Kelly had things going. We had a couple of coaching changeovers, and when you have coaching changeovers, you sometimes lose the recruiting. So Cody's come back and reestablished that. She's done a really nice job, and they're on the way up. Like I feel like they're going to be ranked here very soon. They're receiving votes now, as they say. So I'm excited about that. But backtracking about the other part is I like to be around people that have that championship mindset, and I want that in every event that we have. So I was at the trail this morning with the distance runners, and seeing how their run's going, things of that nature. I go into the weight room with the men's sprinters, and like I kind of hang out at the jumps practice from time to time. I like to go to throws practice. It's all by design, because I think it's the most important thing is for these kids to know who I am. Like it's easy to be a head coach and get stuck that this is your event group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's all my event group. So I have to have some hand in everything that we're doing. I think that leadership is allowing those coaches to coach, but I can just still be at practice, sort of like hanging out, getting to know them away from just how far they throw or how far they jump or how fast they run. And if I can establish that relationship now before we go on the road, when we're on the road and we have to go to war, they know who their leader is. They know why they're going to battle. They know what we're all about. And it goes beyond a team meeting. It goes beyond a rah-rah speech and all that kind of stuff. So if I'm going to truly lead these people, that's what I'm excited about. If I'm going to truly lead these people, then I get to know them better. And I feel like why I had the most connection with my teams at Barton was because there was 2 coaches, 60 kids. I mean, like I was coaching about 50 of them. And Dave was coaching about 8 to 10 of them, so it was like, and we were around each other all the time. And it was like one voice, one vision, one goal. Truthfully, our goal was to win, but our goal was really to get out of there. And everybody's like their goal was to like get a degree, get to Division I, get a degree, change my life, those type of things. That's what I mean by get out of there. So like I'm excited about that aspect of the program and what I can hope to provide the value for those kids from that perspective.
I think there's a difference between performance and leadership. Performance is when we over-index in that rah-rah speech, the night before the conference meet, or, the random team meeting rah-rah, before we start fall practice. And then there's leadership, being involved in all aspects of your program, meaning, I know what's going on in the throws group. I know what's going on in the distance group, et cetera. And I think consistency happens on the leadership side. You can get some acute bumps in performances and whatnot in the performance side when you're the raw guy. I mean, I've seen some amazing speeches that have made me cry a little bit, to be honest with you, and maybe want to run through a brick wall. But that high emotional, it comes down, crashes a lot more when you can build your base up and build that trust of the leadership. I think that's where some longer term successes occur. So I'm proud to hear that from you on how you're building the team.
Yeah, man. I'm not I'm not a rah-rah guy. Like I am a plant a seed, let the seed grow, cultivate the seed 6 months later. Like I think a team meeting that I have that sounds insignificant to a kid in September, if I'm able to reference that team meeting and something I said that day hopefully was impactful, or more importantly, if those kids are able to reference that and remember what I said, or they're talking about it, even if they're making fun of something that I might have said, like they heard what I said. And then when I go back to it, it was laying a foundation for what we're going to do, tying all of this whole conversation together. When I first got to Oklahoma, you thought maybe I'm not arrogant. I was arrogant. So I got to Oklahoma. I just won a world championship, just got a medal. And I walked into Oklahoma and I was going to change things. They scored 4 points in the sprints the year before I got there at the conference meet. And I walked in and sat down in our very first meeting, and I told them we were going to win the Big 12, which they hadn't done in years, and that we were going to do it because we were going to make it happen. We were going to score points. We were going to do this. The people in the room are going to make this happen. And also, by the way, we've got 3 recruits that we're bringing in that are going to come here and they're going to help us win. Right? Like I just told them what was going to happen, and I told them it was going to come down to the 4x4. And we were going to be ready to have a 4x4. And I don't know what they ran the year before, but it wasn't good. And fast forward, we scored 48 points at the conference meet in the sprints. We won the conference championship. It did come down to the 4x4. And it came down to a point where I had to pick between one of 2 guys, right? And then I did another thing, which I do a lot, is tested one of the kids. I said, hey, man, I'm not going to run you. I'm going to run this guy because whatever. And the kid looked like he was going to punch me in the face. Right. And as soon as it looked like he was going to punch me in the face, I was like, are you mad? Like, are you pissed at me? Yes. Good. That's what I want.
That's
You're off. You're on. Let's go. We talked about this 4 months ago. Let's go. Do your job. And then we go out, we won, life is good. But it wasn't that I gave him this massive rah-rah speech. It was that I told him what the expectation was. I planted the seed. I was able to back it up because I didn't just make it up. Like, I actually had a vision for where they go. And then if we can reference that, cultivate that seed later, that's more what my leadership style looks like, probably.
Well, what I just learned is next time I see you, just punch you in the face and you're going to love me. You're like, oh, that's it, Mike. That's the attitude I want.
I want people to be that passionate. I want somebody, if I take you off that relay, I want you to be mad at me. Yeah. Like, it's okay. It's okay to break with your girlfriend. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be a little bit pissed off. It means you care, and that you want to be good, which means that you and I are going to align on a lot of things, if that's the case.
That's right. Well, you and I have aligned on a lot of things, my brother. And today was great, man. I'm so grateful. Thank you for your patience with all the hiccups that we've had. Hopefully no one listening even hears or sees hiccups. Maybe they just think it was a streamline. This was one of the more technical difficulty ones that I've had, and it was all on me. But so I appreciate that. And really, Matt, and I expect nothing less from you because I've known you for so long. Really grateful for, your openness and your authenticity. I think that's how we're going to, my goal with this podcast, these long forms, really going in deep to journeys here, is to help rise up the profession. I want to really professionalize the profession of being a coaching, of being a track and field coach on all levels, high school, college, everything in between, because I think you deserve it. I think I love, Dan's talk about, well, if we're going to be taken seriously, then we better take it serious. So that's how I think about track and field coaches. I'm like, man, if we're going to take track and field coaches seriously, well, then we better be taking some stuff serious here. So there's different aspects, obviously, with the equipment, but also through, my advocacy for track coaches. So anytime, and it happens a lot. I'm really, proud of a lot of the men and women who've joined us on the podcast. There's a lot of openness and authenticity. And again, that's what I expect. So I appreciate when people bear that out. And I think it moves us forward. There are going to be people who are listening right now that hear this story and they make a decision. They make a decision of, oh, you know what? I do need to step my game up as a coach, not just in the X's and O's. I know how important X's and O's are. Certainly you got to know how to coach, but there is so much more to the profession of coaching track and field. And that's what I want to continue to rise up. And I think your story and your journey is a part of that process.
I got a long ways to go, but I appreciate that, man. Thanks.
Yeah. That just means we're not completely old. I love that. That's a good thing. Well, Matt, thank you again, man. The most important thing, most valuable thing you can give me is your time. I'm really grateful for your time here, and thank you guys for listening, man. I hope you took some nuggets here, man. I really kind of think of, and I've heard feedback about this, that people are listening. Not always in your car. Don't do this in your car, but they're taking notes. Take notes of what these men and women who join us here on the podcast talk about, because there's a lot of hot takes that are really important on the college level. It's continuing to evolve every 30 minutes. It's changing. So we're going to change together and get better. So thank you for being here. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again and have some fun. Thanks, guys.